The dim, hazed golden light of the suspensor globes hung low, suffusing the ranks of meticulously ordered data slates and the multitude of aged vellum scrolls cramming the scriptorium, staining the air itself a dusty amber. Young scribe brother Caliban shifted on the unyielding coldness of worn stone, the faint, incessant scratch of his quill across the receptive surface, the only outward sign of his focused turmoil. The acrid tang of drying ink, the underlying, comforting earthiness of ancient parchment, and always that chilly, metallic bite of endlessly cycled air, the recycled breath of the monastic library itself coiled in his throat. Far above, almost absorbed by the immense stone vaulting, the low hum of a ventilation drone filtered down, its constant thrumming a bass note woven seamlessly into the deeper, resonant whisper of unknowable machinery pulsing up through the bedrock. As if the fortress monastery's heart beat directly below, its rhythm felt rather than truly heard. The library of the Dark Angels stood austere, immense, intimidating towering shelves and shadowed alcoves hewn directly into the very flesh of Erelin Secundus, this world of emerald forests. Through the high lancet window slits, slender beams of alien jade sunlight occasionally dared pierce the ambient gloom, ephemeral fingers of illumination that briefly carried with them the distant scent of rain on humid foliage, a hint of ozone, the faintest echo of tumbling waterfalls from the vast, unseen wilds beyond the monastery's monolithic walls. Yet here, beneath the crushing weight of Cyclopean stone and the suffocating mantle of eons' worth of untold histories, that outside world felt less than a memory, drowned utterly by the profound, introspective stillness of the chapter's cloister, a silence somehow amplified by the ambient noises of preservation and duty. Caliban dipped his quill tip into the shallow inkwell beside his ledger, watching the viscous black liquid ripple minutely in the tremor of his own unsteady hand. The pressures of responsibility pressed down the chapter librarian's summons had been explicit, a task entrusted to so very few, to summarize the history of the Dark Angels. Behind him, echoing unnervingly in the quietude, impossibly ancient vault doors groaned their brief complaint as an automaton servitor shuffled past, its mechanical limbs clicking with unnervingly precise cadence, bearing a tray of fresh, glinting ink vials towards another shadowed alcove. Caliban fiercely resisted the primal urge to glance back, marshaling his discipline as a scribe of the chapter demanded, forcing his eyes and concentration solely upon the ledger before him. To falter here, in this most sacred repository of the Unforgiven's accumulated, often guarded lore, was unthinkable, a sin against duty and knowledge itself. The heavy, scent-laden air seemed to intensify, bearing down upon him physically as his mind grappled with the monumental task. His fingertips brushed the edge of the first parchment, its treated surface unnervingly smooth under the gentle caress, releasing a faint, sweet sickly fragrance of the preserving oils that battled time's relentless decay. From somewhere unfathomably deep within the labyrinth, a cogitator whirred into uninvited life, its activation a low growl barely distinguishable beneath the constant, quiet symphony of fellow scribes, scratching quills, and the soft, dry rustlings of venerable pages deliberately turned elsewhere. As his own quill began to move, tracing the complex, Gothic script in the ink his own hands had mixed, Caliban felt it again, the sensation of being watched. The watchers in the dark. Those silent, robed figures glimpsed only peripherally, fleeting shifts in the deeper shadows of the monastery corridors, a momentary chill where none should exist. Never seen wholly, only felt at the edge of perception. He wrenched his focus back, forcing the half-formed dread away. Hesitation was a luxury he simply could not afford. Charged with a librarian's direct command, he must press on. The summary, he knew, must begin at the Genesis, the absolute beginning of the Legions Astartes, the Emperor's forging of the Angels of Death, the creation of the First Legion, and the eventual discovery of Caliban. He wrote slowly, deliberately, the strokes of his pen reflecting the measured precision drilled into him, his inner eye combing through the complex, often contradictory web of fragmentary accounts, labyrinthine chronicles, and redacted codices that constituted the chapter's fragmented saga. As the initial words took tangible shape on the vellum legio I, primus inter pares, fons origines, the distant, muted tolling of monastery bells resonated through the stone, their deep vibrations echoing the prayers of the reclusiam for brothers lost eternally beyond the void. Caliban permitted himself a solitary, bracing intake of breath, drawing in the unique, sacred perfume of his world whetstone, rich ink, the deep vanillichin musk of ancient vellum. His eyes flickered upward for barely an instant, catching the flickering, dancing glow of the suspensor globe suspended above his station, its uncertain light casting shifting, phantom halos over the unfolding text beneath his hands. And so he began to tell the tale, wielding not bolter nor chainsword as a battle brother of the chapter might, but bearing the only weapon entrusted to him, the meticulously preserved word. The truth, or at least those splintered, sanctioned fragments of the truth he was deemed worthy or necessary to hold. In the vast, oppressive shadow world of the Imperium's recorded history, there exists one foundational strand, pulled taut across the millennia, stretching back to the very ignition of its doomed, stellar glory. It begins, irrevocably, with the First Legion, the Alpha pattern, the primordial template from which all subsequent angels of death would be rendered, known in those early, near-mythical nights simply as his 6 hosts. Their name would resonate down the brutal corridors of the ages, uttered with reverence chillingly balanced by profound dread, the Dark Angels. Their destiny was intertwined inextricably with the bloody birth throes of humanity's most desperate empire, and with secrets buried so deep they could plague 10,000 years. When Terra was a fractured carcass, choking beneath immense blankets of radioactive ash and the pervasive gloom of its own irredeemable despair, the Emperor arose as its ultimate architect of salvation. His relentless vision required more than mortal armies of unthinking gristle and yielding bone. It demanded a force possessed of impossible endurance, unbreakable resolve, and a strength capable of shattering gods. Thus hammered into being upon the anvil of a tortured world was the First Legion. These warriors were far more than enhanced soldiers. They were embodied weaponry in its most ruthless, perfected form, their creation the final culmination of a process long concealed within the dark crucibles of pre-Unity Terra. Forbidden whispers speak of a primordial strain cultivated then, nurtured through a sacrifice so immense, so casually horrific, as to be unthinkable to the minds of those sheltered beneath the later, illusory peace of the Pax Imperialis. Terra itself was a wasteland gnawed by the twin abominations of atomic ruination and genetic collapse, and the Emperor's need for genetically pure human stock demanded blood offerings beyond counting. Flesh tithes, immense and devouring, were demanded from foes newly conquered, and the desperate, nomadic clans barely clinging to life within Terra's poisoned, scarred wilderness valleys. Each unwilling contribution of bone and sinew, an offering swallowed by the Forge God's vision of biological purity, instrumental perfection. From this shattered genus Homo, the First Legion took form not an army born of one tribe or culture, but a grim mosaic formed from the apex predators of Terra's myriad, desperate martial traditions. The most ancient annals depict them as a force both inspiring and deeply unnerving, profoundly terrible. Contained within their forms resided an unmatched, simmering lethality. Unlike the legions that would follow, adorned with singular heraldry and shared purpose from a found Genefather, they bore no unifying aesthetic, save the all-consuming blackness of their armor plates, blank islets unreadable as the void between stars. Yet, they carried with them an unmistakable weight, a palpable aura radiating the Emperor's own imperative. Their every deployment spoke with deafening silence of this fundamental reality. They were not forged to conquer territory, build alliances, or win hearts. Their sole purpose was profound, unmitigated destruction. Where they fought, the concept of conquest held no meaning. Only absolute, irreversible annihilation followed. They scoured Terra's indelible, last warlord scabs from their Ferrocrete strongholds, reduced unbreachable fortresses held by tyrants to fields of cooling slag, and annihilated the teeming, technologically infested legions of the rogue techno-barbarians, grinding them into the dust-choked earth their diseased ambitions had poisoned. Their weapons, unearthed relics from the deepest Archotech crypts of a haunted past, instruments wielded with chilling, calculated precision that often verged on the cruelly methodical, patient even in their utter eradication. In these primordial days, before the later rigidities of companies or chapters locked the legions into structure, the first operated in flexible, often self-contained hosts. These formations were shaped inherently by the disparate martial philosophies of the recruited tribes. the lethal mounted lancers of ancient Anatolia might ride lightning swift beside the chain axe-wielding berserkers drawn from the frozen, ruin-dotted wastes of Scandia. This exquisite, necessary diversity became the crucible for their power of Forgeheart, where the fragmented weaponscraft and brutal strategies of a shattered world were refined, purified, made infinitely more potent under the unfaltering gaze and will of the Omnissiah's heir. These early war hosts forged, in their very disparate natures, the foundational doctrines that would one day codify the tactical genius of the entire Astartes endeavor. As the Ember Ashclay dramaturgy of the Unification Wars reached its final, thunderous movements, the First Legion deployed onto the stage not merely as the Emperor's perfected experiment, but as his utterly complete, refined instrument. 10,000 angels of death unified by singular purpose. Their true, unshackled debut erupted across the scorched plains of Samand in 668 M30, a city hardened in defiant hatred. Its monstrous defenders, the genet-twisted Udug Hull, nightmarish biotech abominations, birthed by the so-called King of Akkad. The Udug Hull were terror incarnate, beings whose corrosive blood melted ceramite, their monstrous strength capable of crushing war automata, their bones corrupted into poison-dripping spikes. Nearly 200,000 of these hellspawn held the strategic passhead against the Imperial advance. The First Legion met this tide of biohorror head-on, a howling furnace of black ceramite and unleashed fury beneath an apocalypse-darkening sky. Earth churned to smoking glass beneath plasma burns, air thick and choking with fallout ash and the ozone stink of unleashed energy weapons. When the unnatural silence finally descended, it found only ruin. Mountains of Udug Hull corpses blanketed the blasted heath. The severed, still-dripping head of Akkad Hal, great king of Akkad, grotesquely adorned the battle harness of Hector Thrain, newly elevated Grandmaster of the First Legion for this impossible slaughter. For navigating this crucible and leading the Legion to absolute victory, the Emperor himself gifted Thrain the mantle, and burden of Sinistram Imperatoris his left hand, his ultimate tool of unstoppable annihilation. This victory irrevocably cemented the First as the inviolable vanguard of the Emperor's galactic ambition. Another testament to their fearful potential came during the relentless siege of Antioch, fought later in the Unification Wars. 9 distinct hosts of the First, each band numbering deliberately no more than 30 battle brothers, laid siege to an ancient, adamantium-tiered bastion fortress, a relic believed unbreachable by contemporary armies. Its defenders, entrenched behind walls shielded by potent, forgotten Dark Age technologies, repelled wave after wave of conventional assaults with contemptuous ease. Yet the First Legion embodied an entirely alien paradigm of war. Each separate host struck independently, a series of perfectly timed, perfectly executed incursions. One probing key waypoint A simultaneously, Host B struck point F at the perfect moment creating distraction, while Host C scaled the sheer impossible face above the blind spot, etc., not as groups, but as a single organism with divisible limbs. They probed weakness, adapted strategies instantly, sharing insights across encrypted Vox links as if possessed of a single, hyper-adaptive mind. Within mere brutal days, resistance ceased utterly. The legendary fortress lay a cracked, molten ruin, its last defenders liquidated entirely. But while their staggering triumphs resounded through the burgeoning victorious Imperial army, inspiring legends and deep dread in equal measure, the Dark Angels themselves remained distant effigies, shrouded by an aura of terrifying, silent finality. To their mortal allies within the Imperiales Auxilia, they were figures who simultaneously incited awe and induced paralyzing fear, the Emperors will given physical form in its most pure, unforgiving aspect. Even amidst the most scarred, unshockable veterans of Terra's countless petty wars, whispered conversations circulated about the silent figures in jet black plate who bore the Emperor's aquila, yet possessed an unsettling, non-human quality as though they were not soldiers, but animate shadows given ghastly purpose. Speaking of them felt dangerous, as if drawing their unseen gaze invited a swift, impersonal termination order. When the gathering storm of the Great Crusade finally broke, hurling the Imperium into the fractured stars, the First carried this devastating legacy outward. While other nascent legions reclaimed errant human worlds or enforced imperial compliance upon fractious cultures, the Emperor dispatched his firstborn, his left hand, to confront the existential terrors that pulsed sickeningly beyond the ragged borders of human comprehension. The unnamed Xenos monstrosities discovered gasping near-dead stars, the illogical warp-spawned shards of gibbering nightmare, the insidious, labyrinthine horrors buried by time on worlds where reality itself had frayed all met final dissolution before the patient, utterly relentless advance of the angels of death. Yet these Pyrrhic victories, these abyss-preventing actions, rarely found description within the triumphal scrolls unrolled in the imperial palaces, Sanctum Imperialis, as entire planets subjected were celebrated. Their battles were invariably fought within starless interstellar voids, above worlds quarantined due to irredeemable taint, locations solely recorded internally only to be expunged in sensorial ink. Even within the whispered circles of the Emperor's inner court, should anyone dare to even know of them, their actions garnered acknowledgement only as silence, a distinct absence. Theirs evolved into an alien form of honor, the immutable trust, the crushing burden demanded of those who confront and vanquish humanity's greatest profunditival fears, the knowledge of true horrors, without expectation of recognition or acclaim. On Enceladus's irradiated, lifeless expanse, they unleash the unspeakable anguish contained within genophage weaponry to scourge an infestation of dimension-bleeding warp entities that threaten to escape physical constraints. Over the forgotten dust seas of Beton Vale, they systematically, unit by agonized unit, obliterated an entire xeno-species whose latent psychic crucible threatened to unravel the material universe's localized structural integrity at a molecular level. These were acts of fundamental preservation, conducted with foresight so bleak it accepted the necessity of genocide and willful forgetfulness, ensuring the nascent Imperium would mercifully remain oblivious to the galaxy-warping nightmares the Dark Angels discovered, then cleansed in the silence. As their legend grew, nurtured in shadows, so too did the isolating weight of their secret legacy become an internalized prison. Unlike the gathered brotherhoods of the other legions, gleefully awaiting the triumphant day of reunion with their genetic deity Primarch's figures, whose charisma and inherited authority would grant them ultimate cohesion, and purpose the Dark Angels endured the interstellar exile utterly unbound. No single paternal voice directed the first in its infancy. No unifying demigod granted them an identity beyond the mission. In the long millennia before their own lion would be recovered, the disparate war hosts of the first refined their brutal methods independently, codifying doctrines later collected as the Principia Bellicosa. Their signature adaptability, born from necessity and cultivated through isolation, became their defining characteristic, their shield and strategy. In time, their sole existence would irrevocably intertwine with the Lion, El'Jonson, Lord of Caliban. But during those lonely, storm-tossed decades before the return dawned, the Dark Angels stood utterly alone, unheralded and unbroken, the Emperor's shadow-sharpened dagger aimed eternally at the throat of cosmic night within. This pale, first rise of the Legion was inextricably interwoven with the final lament of the Emperor's original instruments of destruction, the Thunder Warriors. Those towering giants, forged for crude, unavoidable savagery, represented humanity's faltering first step back from the age of strife's abyss. They were necessary blunt horrors, a cleansing storm that swept aside fractured empires, chucking their petty gods aside who stood against nascent imperial unity. While capable of feats beyond human warriors in the raw maelstrom of close-quarter carnage, their existence was tragic. Lives agonizingly short, minds rapidly succumbing to genetic degeneration, uncontrollable rages boiling inevitably over. Battle fury transformed easily into murderous madness against allies or civilians once the immediate target dissolved. Crucially, unlike the nascent legions Astartes, the Thunder Warriors remained fragmented groups, individual powerhouses never forged into a resistant unity. They recalled mobs unleashed rather than disciplined army formations. The ragged survivors stumbled towards the remembered sanctuary, warriors once titans, now broken shells dragging themselves through the dust-choked valleys of Mount Ararat. Their fury, that volatile weapon the Emperor had once harnessed to forge a broken earth, now boiled untempered, uncontrolled, a storm without direction. He had seen its cracks, known their time was spent, And among the scattered fragments of history that lingered in desolation's embrace, the tale whispers even now. The nomadic tribes haunting those wastes murmur it in hushed, fearful reverence, of warriors clad not in the gaudy heraldry of empire, but a gray deeper than storm clouds, grim and uniform as death itself. It's said, though certainty is ashes now, that when those thundershocked remnants heaved themselves towards safety, refuge transmuted instantly into slaughtering ground. A sudden, silent fury erupted. Plasmic fire seared the air, bolt shells tore ceramite and flesh alike, cutting them down where their weary resolve finally faltered. Whether it was indeed the First Legion, already perfected in their latent fury, the Emperor's ultimate blade made real, that delivered this final mercy, this cold necessity, none can prove. But the grey-clad executioners of whispered legend fit the nascent angels of death all too perfectly, embracing the grim honor, the terrible weight of their birthright. To erase the flawed prototypes, the unstable foundation stones. Some among the dying Thunder Warriors, their eyes clear at the last, had fathomed the truth hidden within the whispers of arty replacements. These weren't brethren, they were perfected successors, granted the genetic stability, the extended lifespan, the very eternity they themselves had been denied. Understanding became poison, betrayal curdling their ending. A savage rage, a final, futile rebellion surged against the distant emperor, only to be met and extinguished, as records fragmentary suggest, by the golden custodian guard beside the newborn Astartes. It was a slaughter, a grim baptism sealing the transition from the Age of Terror, propelling the Imperium into the sweeping tides of the Great Crusade. The First Legion sailed into that stellar expansion, bearing its unique, crushing burden, the Emperor's chosen scourge. As other legions, the steadfast Imperial fists, the lupin fury of the space wolves, the Arcaneth-threaded Thousand Suns marched to conquest and glory, finding their place within the grand design, swelling in number and reputation beneath the galactic glare. The first existed in seamless shadow. They were the Angels of Death, a title bestowed, a role inhabited fully. They became the lethal tip of a spear plunged into the galaxy's deepest, most blighted wounds. Their vigil was solitary, conducted not beneath banners of triumph, but in the chilling, infinite blackness of the Uit cloud's rim. Lightless deeps swallowed their deeds. They hunted ancient nightmares stirring on frozen moons, possessed by forgotten evils. They stalked predatory horrors slithering through the tumultuous eddies of the Haloscar, primordial beasts hungering for the unprepared worlds of nascent mankind. No thankful cheers from liberated worlds echoed here, only the silence of the void and the concussive blasts of extermination. This duty, thankless, unseen, performed leagues from the shared war songs of their brothers, they carried without murmur. To them, this shadow war wasn't exile but a sacred privilege, a secret communion. They alone held the title Angels of Death, grounding the name that would one day define their entire kind, a moniker forged in isolation's crucible. For nearly a solar decade, they waged this silent war, severed from the burgeoning Imperium, their only light the strobing flashes of distant battles and the cold glow of alien worlds. This prolonged solitude crystallized their disparate strengths. The informal warrior hosts began to coalesce, distinct orders emerging, dedicated to specific, perfected arts of annihilation. Siegecraft void deep, exploitation, infiltration, containment. Isolation honed innovation as each order developed its own distinct rites, doctrines, secret codes to safeguard the brutal lessons learned against impossible odds. Their archives became grim libraries of tactical dread, cataloging how to wage war in nightmares, knowledge invaluable later in the Crusade's far-flung horrors. When they finally returned to the Emperor's side, stepping once more into the light of Sol, the transformation was stark, profound. Their armor, once the prototype's flat utility gray, deepened to an abyssal black, swallowing luminosity. It was said their very expressions mirrored the void that had incubated them, stern, impassive, spirits hammered hard by relentless gloom. No fanfare shattered the shadows they brought back. No garlands draped their angular pauldrons. Solemn silence met them, the Emperor's approval conveyed in an imperceptible glance, a curt gesture placing them precisely where he needed hearts carved from darkness. The speardip at Saturn's muster, the vanguard plunging first into the uncharted terrors beyond. Their fleet reflected this destiny. While other legions received the shining wonders from Saturnine and Martian forges, The first tapped the Emperor's own ancient armory. Ghost ships from humanity's lost zenith sailed once more hulking Gloriana battleships like moving citadels, sleek but brutal Promethean cruisers, scarred Tiamat destroyers bristling with archaic, soul-scoring weaponry. These were the tools of finality, relics preserved for apocalypse, entrusted because only they could bear the weight of enemies designed to unravel reality, horrors whose very existence threatened sanity. While other chapters gathered stars to the imperial firmament, the first remained the Emperor's hammer, his wrath given form. They deployed weapons whose use was anathema, whose existence was expunged from imperial annales. Gena-shredding phages, radiation purges that scoured worlds sterile, munitions capable of sundering stellar geometries. Victories bought with such tools were redacted, invisible. Records remained sparse, barren of conquests other legions celebrated. While the Ultramarines tallied compliant worlds, the first counted horrors reduced to ash, their triumphs erased to preserve the fragile minds of their fellow man and deny hope to the abyss. This necessary secrecy birthed a suffocating misunderstanding. Outsiders saw only cold distance, arrogance even. To legions securing glories under broad daylight, the first's lack of recorded triumphs seemed an indictment, a mark of failure or barren purpose. And resentment found fertile ground, not solely planted by misjudgment. The first, hardened by their unique burden, nurtured their status as the chosen. Whispers grew within their ranks, beliefs that placed them above their peers, closer to the throne, embodiments of absolute purpose. This corrosive pride began to undermine the unity once forged in the Uit's belly, feeding an insidious rift that widened with every unacknowledged sacrifice swallowed by the void. The inevitable collision came at Canis Bala, a star system obscuring horror like a scab atop imperial space. Their relentless efficacy, their perceived invincibility honed over decades of unseen strife, bred a complacency as deep and dangerous as the space they stalked. Here coiled an enemy alien in mind and method, technology that bent physics into blasphemy. The First Legion approached with blithe arrogance born of long silence, dispatching a mere token force, a flick of celestial dismissal expecting easy submission. Instead, the enemy lashed back with the fury of the cornered and utterly unknown. Their physics-defying weapons scraped the Legion's force off the contested world, leaving grievous wounds. Shock ricocheted through surviving command, disbelief curdling into hot indignation. Surely, this was an aberration. Reflex, not reason, fueled the second assault, then a third, each driven less by strategy than the mounting terror of reputation tarnishing, each failing with exponentially greater devastation, armored giants falling like harvested grain under impossible fire. Finally, Grandmaster Hector Thurain, his own pride burning under the weight of spiraling disgrace, led the fourth assault personally, determined to scour this stain with his own hand, his own life if necessary. Honor gleamed brightly in the desperate boarding actions, individual combat prowess undeniable, yet hopelessly inadequate against the sheer, fractal chaos of the enemy's alien numbers and their terrifyingly ingenious defenses. Thurain, finally gazing into the abyss carved by his legion's hubris, understand the scale of his error. With the chilling resolve of the condemned, he remained with his lifeguard, an immovable rock within the raging storm, buying precious breaths with his own destruction so that the pitiful, bloodied remnants of 3 failed waves might escape the grinder. As the broken shards of his shattered force limped away, the Legion's response was utter obliteration. Canis Bala burned. Planetary cores detonated, atmosphere boiled away, the system scoured clean of alien taint. Yet victory was absolute ashes. The sting of this catastrophic failure, the overwhelming humiliation of repeated, bloody retreats compounded by the profound loss of Thurain carved deep fissures through the Legion's core. That ancient unity, the model of discipline and shadowed brilliance cultivated in the abyss, shattered like ceramite under macrocannon fire. The orders, once collaborative, turned inward, jealously guarding their hard-won secrets and doctrines, fortresses held apart by suspicion. The pride that had driven them to become peerless hunters in the Emperor's night became their crippling chain, an internal shadow deepening as the Great Crusade surged outward. Now they were fractured, teetering on the precipice of not just stagnation, but ruin. The edifice stood cracked, discord echoing where shared purpose once roared. The black-clad warriors, who had borne the Emperor's cleansing wrath to the very edge of the galaxy, now found their fearsome fire partially turned inward upon themselves. Fractious hosts glaring with suspicion across widening internal gulfs of ambition, grievance, and scarred esteem. The death of a grandmaster is always seismic. In the First Legion, Hector Thurain's vacant throne became a jagged fault line waiting to rupture. The great council halls of dark angels upon legendary Gramarye, once austere chambers resonating with shared purpose and collective wisdom, descended into a microcosm of the Legion's splintering soul. Masters commanding potent orders, preceptors wielding profound tactical and ritual doctrines, each arrived bearing the weight of perceived superiority, each championing a candidate inevitably guaranteed to ignite rivalries and deepen divisions with his mere nomination. The deadlock was absolute, a poisoned impasse threatening to tear the Legion irreparably apart as it lumbered through crisis after unresolved crisis. It was into this festering wound of ambition and venomous pride that Malcador the Sigillite, the Emperor's shadow and whispered hand, stepped, embodying profound intervention. He arrived not with sanctioned threat or strident proclamation, but presence, wisdom incarnate. His voice, glacial calm, carried effortless authority profound as the bedrock beneath them. He spoke not of tactics, but of architecture. A fortress stands strong on many pillars, true, each essential, yet alone each is but a stone too easily toppled. Together they grant strength. But a fortress, he intoned, this construct of shared defiance must have a master. Without a keystone holding the arch, all the gathered might is undone, scattered into rubble. With this parable laid out amidst their simmering tensions, Malcador, wielding profound insight like a surgeon's scalpel, severed the Gordian not with simple, startling nomination. Not a renowned master or a cunning preceptor whose ascendancy would only deepen factional wounds, but a captain, an officer unbound by allegiance to the warring orders, Jordan Vendris. Captain Vendris of Terran birth, of pragmatic application, belonging not to any specialized host, but serving the staunch XIV company of the 5th chapter. He was no philosopher of warfare, innovator of doctrine. His name was etched on banners scripted in valor won under relentless fire. Steadfast endurance shaped on the anvils of countless brutal campaigns across the dying battlefields of old Earth during its tumultuous unification. His strength was constancy, loyalty, and unshakable foundation. Malcador's logic resonated with unassailable clarity. In a legion consuming itself through division, Vendris was the binding agent. Untainted by internal cabals, unsullied by vicious rivalries embroiling the high command, he represented the legion's origins, a visceral link to its foundational purpose crafted amidst Saul's cradle world. Faced with the sheer weight of Malcador's ineffable influence, coupled with the crushing fatigue of their own failure and deadlock, the council capitulated. Unanimity, born of necessity rather than fervor, saw Vendris elevated to Grandmaster. His ascent marked a pivot point. He understood profoundly the deep wounds inflicted by arrogance and division festering below an embattled surface, yet saw potential for reconstruction within the Legion's shattered frame. Unity, he knew, forgotten melody consumed by corrosive discord, had to be reforged. But not in council chambers echoing with acrimony, it demanded rediscovery in the furnace fire they knew best: war. His inaugural act as Grandmaster was a decisive, almost symbolic reconnection. He turned the Legion's composite gaze back to its original mandate, outwards to the scream of battle, refocusing on the vast, harrowing expanse of the onrushing Great Crusade. For the very first time, embracing a dangerous necessity, he allowed a coven of remembrancers, carefully chosen souls bound in cellular self-censorship under terrifying oaths of silence, to accompany the First Legion into the void. These fragile chroniclers, few as they were singular witnesses to the Legion's arduous resurgence, documenting deeds shrouded in secrecy for generations, capturing scattered truths of sacrifice illuminated by gunfire. In bearing witness, perhaps understanding could begin, and in understanding, tenuous bonds with estranged brothers, ignorant beyond the veil of secrecy, might slowly reform. Yet records alone were salve, not cure. The First Legion needed agony shared, a crucible capable of transmuting scattered embers of discipline back into a conflagration centered on singular purpose. They required an enemy capable of consuming their fractured pride whole, battering them into desperate, collective survival. As if conjured by Vendris's grim determination demanding this exact trial, reports pulsed through the Imperium's straining astropathic choir speaking of terror, emerging on the Great Crusade's furthest rim. The 5th Legion's pioneers had transgressed forbidden territory and met the Rangda, entities wielding malevolent technology of staggering power, enslaving entire populations within neural collars of agony. Though their estimated territory was limited to a single system, the obscenity they represented enslaved human thralls, shackled by agonizing masters, demanded an immediate, overwhelming purge. Grandmaster Jordan Vendrus saw this nightmarish target. Rallying an immense fleet, hundreds of capital ships drawn from the Legion's depths launching like deep space predators, he led his newly gathered legion into the emerald-tinted abyss of the Advex Moor system, the heart of the Rangda's obscene dominion. What awaited them, there was horror architecturally manifested across 6 nightmarish worlds, encrusted with unseen defenses, teeming with tortured slaves, driven to fanatical defense under brutal technological coercion. Above it all loomed the impossible War Moon, a vast artifice of cosmic spite, its armor shrugging off anything short of Armageddon, its weapons capable of glassing worlds with a single volley. Against a fortress world empire anchored by this orbiting atrocity, Grandmaster Vendrus focused his entire grim armada. 50,000 souls clad in unforgiving black steel, an army scraping itself painfully back towards unity, gazing upon the abyss not as fragments, but as a hammer preparing to fall into the foulest dark. The scale was crushing, a hammer blow delivered with chilling precision. 100,000 warriors of the 1st Legion, bolstered by Mechanicum auxiliaries and a razor-edged wedge of nearly 100 capital ships, tore free from the warp scar and into the icy void above Advex Moors. The Rangdan's defenses, expecting perhaps reconnaissance or raiders, reeled dumbstruck before the avalanche of Imperial might. 3 colossal Glorianaclas battleships, the Invincible Reason, the Paradigm of Hate, and Truth's Razor formed the spear's tip, eclipsing void scopes and annihilating initial resistance with waves of devastating macrocannon broadsides and lance strikes that shredded unprepared barricades. Vox channels choked with panicked Rangdan chatter, silenced almost as swiftly as their unprepared vessels were vaporized by the fleet's overwhelming, industrial-grade firepower. Yet even in this initial crushing wave, the Xenos unveiled their horrific signature: Shadow Blasters. These weapons didn't merely rupture hulls, they poisoned the void itself with lingering phantom screams and a psychic residue of absolute, soul-curdling terror. Victims caught within their unholy radiation burst weren't just slain. They were rendered into grotesque, permanent echoes, their impossible shadows fused to deck plating like macabre murals beneath the flickering emergency lumens of stricken ships, stark testaments to the enemy's insidious potency. Command drained the terror from the Voxnet as orbital dominance solidified, and Vendrige turned his gaze planetward, targeting Advex Moor's extremis, a desolate ice world, sparkling like a flawed diamond in the void, strategically barren but symbolically radiant. It was a lesson to be delivered personally. Led by the Grandmaster himself, 1,000 of the First's finest Terran angels, veterans honed to lethal perfection in the earliest crucibles, plunged planetside against the outpost, defended by tens of thousands of mind-scored thralls, the Nura slaves, and their vile Rangdan overseer. The slaves advanced in brainless tidal surges, flesh and bone breaking upon the dark adamantium cliff-face of the estate's ordered defense lines with unspeakable rhythmic futility. The battle was brutally efficient, a clinical decapitation. Fewer than 20 angels fell before the icy fields ran crimson with the enslaved horde's lifeblood. Vendrige, his Terminator plate sheathed in frozen gore and sharded bone, descended alone into the frigid abyss of the planet's mineshafts, seeking the Rangdan commander. He returned to the fading light bathed in viscera, the Xenos overlord's severed head held high in a fist clenched like iron, a gory icon of defiance that ripped a primordial roar from his legion's throats and carried clear across the Vox, chilling the blood of distant Xenos listeners. This grim pattern repeated with ritualistic precision across the system's ragged, frozen archipelago of outer worlds. Garrisons identified, isolated beneath a crushing orbital umbrella, then systematically erased. The Rangdan expended their Nuraslave multitudes with casual, callous abandon, throwing lives by the tens of thousands, merely to gauge the Angels' tactics and bleed seconds from the inexorable advance. These were Pyrrhic, fleeting victories for the Xenos, outweighed by the ash and ruins left in the Legion's passing. By the culmination of this outer cleansing, nothing stirred amidst the scorched rubble of alien fortifications but the moan of freezing wind over frozen corpses. The First Legion, bruised but unbent, tasted the thin, cold air of the void above Advexmore's Primus. Here awaited the true, gnawing heart of the darkness, the looming, cyclopean menace of the Rangdan War Moon, orbited by a still formidable Xenos fleet and mirrored by planetary fortresses that scarred the primary world's surface, a triad of defiance poisoning the system. Grandmaster Vendrige assessed the trident of destruction. Any direct assault promised an abattoir of Imperial steel and Astartes vidi. The War Moon's weaponry had already scarred the fleet Harvester Sternid destroyers, its energy beams carving molten wounds through shields and hulls with horrifying indifference. Head-on assault invited apocalypse. Vendrige, a strategist forged in necessity, devised a blade to cut the Gordian knot. A single, instrument-sharp chapter of the first would penetrate the War Moon's armored heart like a sanctified dagger, tasked with crippling its monstrous weaponry from within, while the Legion's thunderous might descended upon Advexmore's Primus itself. Both perilous, both vital, failure meant annihilation. The void battle above Primus became a tableau of horror rendered in monstrous scale. Rangdan defense barges formed a rigid constellation around the hulking War Moon, phalanxes anchored by overwhelming firepower that forced the Imperial fleet into a grinding, brutal exchange of broadsides. The emptiness became a seething broth of plasma and shrapnel. Macrocannon shells the size of hablocks screamed silent paths across the night, intersecting with lethal precision against answering beams of sickly green Rangdan energy. Ships died agonizing, protracted deaths, their ruptured carcasses jerking drunkenly through the maelstrom, forming a cemetery of tumbling scrap metal that hamstrung the living vessels still clawing for position and firing solutions through the lethal, ever-shifting labyrinth. At the Siberian core of this chaos, the paradigm of hate bore the fury. Rangdan stalker drones, clinging armored leeches the size of drop pods, infested its decks like carnivorous insects, gnawing through bulkheads and annihilating crew zones with terrifying speed, while the War Moon's primary lance stabbed into its midsection with calculating malice, crippling engines, and boiling away entire decks into incandescent vapor. Mortally wounded, reactor containment disintegrating, the mighty Gloriana hurled itself forward in a terminal dive, a mortal body propelled by mortal will into the flank of its tormented god. The impact ripped into the moon's thick shell with tectonic fury, tearing open a gash vast enough to swallow lesser vessels whole. Miraculously, what remained of the Paradigm's company fought on from their shattered flagship, a battered cohort turning their dying ship into an unstable bomb, overloaded plasma drives screaming into criticality. Their sacrifice detonated with the force of a shrunken sun. The cataclysm didn't just engulf the Paradigm. It corridorled the War Moon, collapsing internal structures miles deep and snuffing its dreadful weapons instantly. A rain of molten moonflesh began its incandescent, slow-motion descent upon the planet below. The death of the Paradigm of Hate left a raw, silent ache across the Imperial Voxnet and the Legion's soul. But its immolation shattered the Rangdan axis. As the silenced, dying Leviathan tumbled, the spectral green eye of its main weapon dark and cold, the surviving Imperial fleet surged through fractured formations, pressing the outraged Xenos fleet with renewed, wrathful fervor. High orbit secured at monstrous cost, the descent began. Thousands of drop pods, a storm of betraying stars falling through atmosphere and colliding with orbital debris trails, impacted the ash-sodden wastelands of Advexmore's Primus, disgorging 30,000 Astartes of the first into hell. Synchronizing with the maelstrom above, smaller, Asuaris-card strike forces launched lancing raids against heavily defended Rangdan fortresses and their shuffling slave columns, enduring brutally efficient ambushes to extract crucial operational data at arterial cost in Terran lives. It was amidst these brutal scrimmage actions, in the deep shadows of slag heaps, and amidst the ruins of Manufactoria leveled to foundations, that the Rangda revealed themselves stripped of intermediaries. Towering obscenities bound in calcified chitin and nerva matter, armed with weapons that fused impossible geometries with nerve-shredding nightmares. Here the Legion's vaunted veterans, tested against 100 horrors, met their match. Angels died ripped apart or dissolved into unliving, slagged versions of themselves by weapons discorporating harmony. Many fell, lost beyond recovery in roaring carnage, or silenced instantly within a flicker of distorted reality. Vendrige, the ever-perceptive master of the killing art, absorbed this raw, painful intelligence. He ordered a recalibration. Stakes raised, the Legion shifted into the decisive stroke, a cohesive, Legion-wide assault launched against the central nexus, identified by the probing strikes. The Rangda, sensing perceived weakness, took the bait with savage arrogance, committing their elite broods, their chitinous terminators, into the bloody embrace of the wasteland. What unfolded was slaughter enacted on a primordial scale, a grinding melee of transhuman bludgeonings and xenomorphic savagery beneath a helot sky raked by orbital beams and falling debris. Losses were catastrophic, staggering on both sides, the broken ground carpeted with the shattered plate of angels and the quivering bioarmor of Xeno's lords. The crucial hinge moment turned on personal combat. Vendrige locked himself in mortal contest against the Rangdan Alpha, the architect of the system's defense. The duel was a symphony of violence rendered at blinding speed grandmaster skill, and Terran ice versus alien brute power honed by evolutionary psychosis within squirming flesh tides. Vendrige emerged victorious, pro-Primarch biology sealing wounds, erupting toxic fluids, standing as his boot pinned the twitching husk, while his immense sword seared through the gangliostum of the Warmaster's neck. That massive head, dripping opalescent ichor, lifted high, broke the Rangdan resistance like a thunderclap. Bereft of their terrible focus, the remaining Xenos shrank back, abandoning the open tombs of the wasteland, retreating into the obscene wombs of their fastness-idatals. There they endured, awaiting the inevitable, doors sealed against a coming fury. The First Legion obliged with prehistoric patience. Bombardments, both orbital and terrestrial, centuries-old siege doctrines applied with secularized hatred, proceeded for agonizing months. Fortress by fortress, monstrous Haifatberg by layer-caked anomaly, reduced to toxic, irradiated rubble echoing only with the absent screams of the slaughtered defenders, the Legion's Astartes showing precisely the mercy they had been shown. None. Above, specialized destroyer cadres scoured the asteroid graves of the shattered war moon, launching penetrator charges into its drifting, frozen caverns, making sterile its inner chambers flooded with xenobiology, ensuring no spore, no scrap of technology, no tainted consciousness lingered. Victory on Advex Mors Primus, salvation bringing under ashes. But the cost 10,000 Astartes dead, 50 warships gone to dust among the orbital graveyard, including the irreplaceable glory ship paradigm of hate left a stark ledger. The system was cleansed, rendered utterly barren, an enduring monument written in void scar and planetary crater, a testament from the First Legion to the galaxy. This place was taken, and here we incurred our grievance. Celebrated by distant remembrancers spinning tales of impossible heroism, extolling their sacrifice by voidcast transmission across the burgeoning Imperium, the victory resonated hollowly within the Terran angels. For in the burgeoning tapestry of the Great Crusade, their solitary crimson thread, pulled taut but tarnished with blood, was being swallowed by a riot of technicolor conquest. Other legions, fueled by reserves of recruits swelling homeworlds, and crucially, commanded by rediscovered demigod primarchs whose legends unfolded like unfolding supernovas, performed comparable or grander feasts of war. They did not stand alone. They carved blazing trails across star charts, shaking the roots of Olympus and Ultramar with resonating awe. The First Legion, their echoes faded into oboes playing in a raging orchestra where brass sections defined the strength. The pride that had sustained them through epics of darkness against terrors before the Emperor's light possessed Cantorak, twisted beneath this slow suffocation, siphoned by the victory's cost, morphing into something hungered, rabid, devoid of satiation. Grandmaster Urian Vendrige, limbs now articulated by scar tissue and paint synthetic grafts, shadowed by decades endured carrying the heavy heraldry of their legacy, battled the unseen war. Fear played secretly, the creeping insignificance. His solution ignited, relentless pursuit. Decade turned upon consuming decade marked by campaign after brutal campaign, each preceding endeavor outmatched peril by the next. Deeper within necromantic tomb states, higher into radiation storm-choked nests of Reaver empires, aligned against mathematically assured mutual obliteration with swarming hive fleets manifesting on galactic margins. The impossible became routine territory, yet did acclaim follow. Did hymns surpass the thunder warriors gone before? The Imperium overlapped, absorbed triumph by incessant hammer blows delivered by legions under the light of their returned demigods. Guilliman's efficiency, Horus's flair, Dorn's immovable will. The First Legion, the Emperor's vanguard executing duties beyond question, expected, mere fulfilling a position predestined. A warm cup against winter's air when frost burns lungs. The bleak, poisoned ground of Cassin hardened the crystallization. Lord Guilliman, steadfast praetor plotting granite logic like liturgy, embraced siege engineering where unification wore scars might dictate cruelty. He laid rings deep against the impregnable, glacis redug against the fortress-world Cassin, refusing to spend his ultramarines heedlessly upon handsome cliffs honeycombed and spitting rabid deathfire down upon invaders. Prudent conservation, assets protected. Vendrige perceived not caution, but weakness, an insult to the firstborn lineage drowning beneath an avalanche of lost glory. Here, under Cassin's atomic orange sky vibrating with sustained shelling, lay his crucible. Disregarding Guilliman's philosophical arguments delivered vox between worlds drenched with logic, underestimating the cunning gates enhanced with hidden obscenity, Vendrige summoned his decree. 10,000 of his finest realms whose names filled Void Armada war conquest rosters, librarians possible shaping gravimetrics, veterans present before Luna shivered, summoned not to trench glory, but surge forward entirely. Their charge became catastrophe rendered frame by frame. Black warriors lengthening phalanxes sprinted across killing fields sown with mind-geological patterns. Banners shining aquila broke spray against chaotic winds spit across by ruptured containment arrays. Hundreds melted instantly under concentrated emission of rampart systems, automatically tracking advancing vectors. Assault cannon fire that decapitated mountains sheared Terminator workplate like rotting lace. They reached the barriers. Detonation charges lit against primary gates fused shut by century-rippled sealants. Armored hulls closed over cratting frames impossibly heavy-teased alchemy. They died forward, plates stepping across the floor 10 corpses thick, forcing purchase with impossible tallies paid by bodies on the blade's pyramid point. Guilliman saw the breach twisted open by tens of thousands tons of dead legionaries and irreplaceable Terran backbone, force Majira beyond refutable. So he ordered reluctantly, ordered moving with mournful precision reserved for execution, with the deep geological deliberation that rephrased mountains beyond continents unfolding time. The dispatched First Legion vanguard won the sprinting race through slaughter alleys choked with atomized architecture, breaching the ceremonial plaza hours ahead of the steady ultramarine wave, cresting consistently across ground methodically secured. Salvation felt close. Resonance across channels captured harsh gasping, banners calling detonation flares overheads mimicked relief. Then the subterranean sarcophagi born. Atomic mines hidden millennia deep beneath the temple's prayer flags made real betrayal more palpable than oxygen. The blast didn't simply detach towers. It ejected kilometers-wide sections kilometers deep into sky, glassing the atmosphere into heat-no-blood smear before collapsing itself. Parliament's faultlines swallowed directly into the singularity death echo birthed below. Vendrige vaporized instantly, perished flawlessly with his honor guard eternally loyal flung into vapor. Under pre-existing orders encoded redundancy principles, his signature command helm vanished beneath untraceable reverberations, entombed eternally beneath planetary boil. Victory? Technically in only lexicon untouched by honor. Guilliman did not congratulate. Ethereal pathways conducting simple molecular air. His address to the remaining survivors resonated echoing cosmos cold. Vainglory is a poor strategist, posing triumph a bitter trophy and an empty prize. Today you have proven the strength of your legion, but not its wisdom. The words branded deeper than radiation burns. Cassin became an entry violated, victory declared, honor patch erased. The recorders sketched laurel wreath upon parchment, then chemically revoked staining beneath an emblematic void-stained smear. Vendrige's death reversed their remains into conflict catalyst, the implosion-shattering chain of command into unstable isotopic atoms versus carbon metastability. The Council of Masters assumed the mantle, differently fractured. Formerly grounded lines polarized into divergent magnetic pathways pursuing independent campaigns, redemption's ecology demanding escalating congestion. The Legion became scattered pieces, dramatic points, shaving off to prove individual faction hegemony through self-harm conducted like strategy. A decade witnessed theater armies engaging catastrophic on conflicts, alone across galaxies' malignant swirling borders. Victory treaties signed upon scrolls soaked in their own vidi as ink substitute. Milo Citadel, said fallen within brutal half-nightfall by combined strikes of 9th/4th 14th chapters impossible. Achieved through sacrifice launching waves Apex Terminator units headlong into mitotic spawn replication zones, unrelenting across configurations, reconfiguring routes instant Desir's entropy overlays. Loss. 10% unmournable casualties, vanishing stepping into infested psychosphere, transmogrified beyond resurrection simulacrum. Why? Solely to outpace the lunar wolves contesting nearby sector triumphs. Venon's Secundus screeched in silence witnessing it. 1,000 warriors of the host of Iron Collate behind iconic War Machine's legacy, 400 Mechanicum lords walking god-comparable steam stacks. Launching charge archaic upon Auric WAGH. Solid at thrice-stated legionary numbers multiplying exponentially seconds. Triumphant, statistically undeniable. Acquired, planet cleansed. Status. Entire campaign stalled, resources scorched, momentum vaporized across decimal reality. Force obliterated beyond mere cripple conditioning. Simultaneously observed galaxy-wide. Guilliman's efficiency poured rendered steel into foundations, forming peerless realm ultramar, basic civilization reconstructing war's erosion. Even Horus, brother Luna Wolf once sharing cruel Terran voraciousness whilst chain-breaking gulfs. Ascended demigod emperor offered chariots extolled upon highest Olympus peaks glory brazier light, attending Redeemer returned. Beneath unnoticed almost, their doctrine held throne. The Principia Bellicosa painstakingly etched, arrows coextensive angel blood into every activation warning clause became Emperor's War Bible disseminated galaxy-wide foundation copy text, where sibling legions absorbed, reinterpreted its distilled lethality into unique expressionism poetry knives. Dark Angel's stagnated monument. Frozen. Tradition ossified armor preventing adaptation accrued scar. Pride became scabbard shaving steel accidentally. Army seeking superlative despair blaze shows convinced intelligence requires superlative pretend intelligence allocated path. They strode battlefields labeled loosely courting terminally mortality statistically, understood inevitably eventually near certain. Allies viewing them climactically now. Silent brethren at feast conversations stopping perceptible. Eyes flickering towards the dark-winged harbingers gathered apart radiating inevitability inevitable that to stand shoulderplate lock moment Armageddon arrives inevitably. Often deployed strategically ill-judged fates, swept beyond necessity. The crusade attained overwhelming zenith. Galaxy groaning sovereignty demanded consolidation fields patterns, then consolidating toward empire singularity. First Legion stood poised structural surpassed. Numbers dwindling logistical collapse imminent frankly obscured. Leadership souls pulling opposing vectors scattering resilience into pressured dust. Spirit indestructible? Yes. But harboring crystalline implication feature, shared peak glass arrowhead strangest formation command. They embodied blade extremely dangerously sharpened brittle temper demanding fracture. Absolute penetration, instant becoming utterly finish resonant vibration factor, instantaneously aligning destruction pathologies. Had momentum followed tendency impulse, perceive momentum unfilterably. Sleeping empire acquired plasma detonation core. Fate elected incompatibly respond. Jade Air Chieftain. White Scars chain-leading Conquest Cruiser Squadron upon periphery astrogation, ragged spiral edge located. Signatures bleed spacetime sensor miracles piercing. Planet massive conquered by forest suffocating all wavelengths past clustered fen argument continent scaled. Secrets layer decaying shields above jungled frankly make obscure structures macabresquer methods retarded demolition fitting Waringen eons. The Emperor? Embarked destination personal mentioned conjecture, row hovercraft cancellous void yacht magnificent majesty, ignoring attendant protocols. Descended atmosphere constituted personal, and captured something's actively dangerous chain genetic architecture swirling oceans, resonance unknown. Revelation arrived capturing war machinery gargantuan construction, implementing ancient petrified proscriptions, beheaded instantly permission retinaskins, biologically encrypted beyond forgery emulators century-derived. Beneath arboreal cathedrals constructed pre-mammalian rain thermonuclear disintegration possible, enacted. Savior's material emerged breathing forest smelling clean riper, unfamiliar, ancient aromatic unfamiliar texture. Their legion salvation importance proved discarded subsequently trivial. Wasteland sickle attempting cultivate flowers alien esoteric. Rescue reside not praises whispering archives imperialis, not battle honors, applauded armorum assembly vast amphitheaters elevated beneath Terran orbital city spires. The birthing announcement comprehended archaic victory shall know delivered. One returned. Primarch's protocol chapter Genesis emergence confirmed Metropolis hive sequence initiation. Time Lion sculpted creator working actively save sculpture. Outdated utterly manufactured need managed how forgot, how utilizes tools impossibly refined base-handed labors. Humble relative astronomy discerns, celestial bodies, twinned impossibly graceful spin. Beyond current mechanical calculation, atmospheric addresses perfection, newly written numerically informing victory enable calculate, unknown theory in exact revolution, dogma understood backwards, illuminates unknown us. Story Lion L. Johnson. Echoes identified spoken sources, fraternal genesis aggregates shared, mystery veil strangling revelation, distal tragedy perforates certainty mountain factory, shadow womb beneath Himalansia salt obtuse machinery. Genetics crafting retina glow burned crystalline vidi, fracture altered scattering, chaos rippling vessel chaotic currents, SUV distant trajectory galaxy. Unknown parallax endless stellar constellations, incomprehensible calculation foundation, mathematically certainty cleaved. The darkness wasn't merely an absence of light on Caliban. It was a living, breathing entity, a suffocating shroud that clung to vast forests perpetually starved of sun, where monstrous shapes birthed and twisted in the malignant embrace of chaos taint. Into this savage, dying world fell Lion L. Johnson, crashing through the canopy like celestial debris, landing solitary in a crucible of perpetual shadow far more perilous than void or vacuum. He was no mere child, not even among his godlike kin. His body and mind unfurled not with mortal sloth, but with a swift, ruthless strength forged in isolation. For uncounted years, a span elusive even to his own later recollection, he walked the whispering, predator-haunted deeps as a myth made flesh a wraith narrated in hushed tones by the superstitious folk huddled in fragile keeps. A spirit of the forest whispered to stalk endless generations, leaving only cryptic, grisly testament to his passing. Great beasts felled with terrifying efficiency, their colossal skulls shattered like brittle pottery, monstrous throats torn open in displays of raw, clinical violence that spoke of neither rage nor sport, only calculated elimination. Discovered not with wonder but visceral terror by a hunting party from one of Caliban's reclusive nightly orders, the lion stood before them like a dark mirror, reflecting the very horrors they battled. A silence profound upon him, a predatory stillness radiating lethal calculation that had the knights, fingers tightening on triggers, poised to erase this seeming abomination they mistook for prey. It was Luther, a champion resonant with renown, who saw beyond the feral facade. He perceived not a beast to be slain, but a singular weapon, honed by the wilderness into an instrument of unparalleled lethality, waiting to be aimed at humanity's tormentors. Giving him name and purpose, Luther christened him Lion L. Johnson, son of the forest, a title as hard and rooted as the gnarled heartwood of Caliban, and brought him to the relative haven of the order, one brotherhood daring enough to weave commoner and noble into its ranks under the singular banner of mankind's defense against the great beasts. Within the austere, echoing stone halls of Aldir, the order's fortress monastery, the lion grasped the intricacies of human language and fractured culture with an unnerving, inhuman rapidity that shocked even Luther. His intellect devoured knowledge. His adaptability was a blade forever whetted. Yet the essential mystery of his origin remained a closed tome, radiating palpable otherness to all who faced his frigid, implacable gaze. His rise was a silent tempest, inexorable and swift. In combat he was unmatched, a strategist whose cold mind unraveled enemy intentions as easily as breathing. devoid of battle frenzy, but overflowing with a terrifying precision. A measured application of lethal force, striking only when victory was mathematically assured, offering dread silence where others roared, granting no quarter because survival taught that mercy invited annihilation. This quiet, unshakable mastery became an irresistible magnet, drawing recruits and kindling desperate hope in Caliban's besieged populace, culminating in the lion conceiving a dream others dared not whisper complete eradication of the great beasts. Before him, the knights fought a grinding war of lethal defense. El'Jonson demanded annihilation, calling for a crusade to purge the forest's root and stem, a war ending only when the last monstrosity drew its corrupted final breath. Skepticism met his grim pronouncement, yet the sheer gravity of his will and the chilling resonance of his vision bent doubt to purpose, rallying even rival knightly orders to the seemingly impossible standard. The crusade became a decade-long tapestry of brutality and despair, woven with threads of fire and blood. The lion led always from the thunderous forefront, his blade a silver arc spitting ichor as he felled terrors grown incalculably old in gleeful slaughter. Under his command, the old codes dissolved. Ambushes sprung like steel jaws, watersheds soured with poisons, great swathes of ancient forest set ablaze to flush and incinerate mercy discarded as a suicidal luxury, survival demanding, necessitating, requiring utter, complete annihilation. When the tide turned, humanity gaining a cruel, blood-soaked ascendancy, El'Jonson reshaped Caliban with the same unyielding pragmatism that governed his warfare. He shattered the ossified feudal chains binding the order, flinging its ranks wide open to any able to wield a blade against the nightmare, provoking howling dissent from the aristocratic loyalists among the Knights of Lupus, yet swelling the order's strength with fresh blood, enabling deeper, fiercer thrusts into the corrupted woodlands. This flowering defiance bloomed into open rebellion when the Knights of Lupus saw doom in the great beast's extinction. Knowing their fading aristocratic privilege, rooted in martial indispensability, would wither without the eternal siege to justify it. The lion saw this rebellion not as politics, but as a cancerous threat metastasizing within his crusade's vital organs. He crushed it without hesitation, without fanfare, tearing down their proud fortresses and casting the names of Lupus into the everlasting mire of infamy. The crusade ended in a silence heavy with the ghosts of millennia. Caliban, for the first time in its tortured history, breathed air free of slavering terror, her people crowning Lion El'Jonson's savior and grand master. He accepted these honors with the profound detachment of one weaned on solitude and the imperative of the kill. Titles meant nothing, rituals less. Victory was the sole monument he understood or desired, its attainment an exhausting necessity concluded. Yet where he perceived completion, others nurtured ruin. Luther, the man who named him, who stood beside him as equal and champion, now found himself eclipsed, cast into shadow by the solar radiance of his own discovery. Camaraderie calcified into jealousy, a dissonant chord thickening into a festering wound to fracture El'Jonson, ever ice forward on the next necessary task, failed utterly to notice, a blindness pregnant with catastrophic consequence. The Emperor's arrival ripped the Caliban sky asunder, a cataclysmic moment forever reshaping the planet and the scattered legion awaiting its father. The lion, freshly crowned Grand Master, stood amidst the uneasy peace of his conquest only to find destiny hurtling from the stars. The master of mankind descended, guided by the psychic beacon blazing within his lost sun, resplendent in gold beyond description, and flanked by 500 transhuman titans of the First Legion, swathed in death-black plate-etched with symbols stark as grave markers against Caliban's dark verdure. He arrived. For the lion, taciturn internal landscapes resonated with instant, irrevocable recognition. The shaping force, the indomitable will that was his essential core, vibrated in absolute harmony with its celestial source. Without words, he knelt, pledging fealty absolute. The Emperor unveiled his cosmic lineage, naming him Genosire of the First, master of warriors sculpted from his own essence since time's dim dawn, their meeting already crystallizing into legend beneath Caliban's shadowed boughs. To the awestruck populace, it was myth become flesh their imagined dark angels manifest, kneeling before the lion, their mortal god. Proof followed swiftly, brutal and undeniable. the lion tested the First Legion's captain, his Calibanic blade moving with terrifying speed, disarming the veteran warrior with a gesture as economical as it was devastating. Thenceforth, the Legion bore a new name, the Dark Angels, a title steeped in Caliban's doomsayer myths, perfectly mirroring their somber purpose. The Emperor's touch ignited Caliban's agonizing rebirth. The vast, oppressive forests defining its millennia crumbled before roaring machinery, titanic engines of ruin clearing land in kilometers per day, while Manufactoria, vomiting colossal pillars of sulfurous smoke, arose like cancerous pustules. Mines gnawed deep into planetary bone, fueling the limitless hunger of the Great Crusade's engines. Resistance flared scattered knights sworn to a dead world order, spitting defiance at progress and technology only to be obliterated without hesitation. The First Legion executed traitors with impartial steel, etching the price of defiance in pulped flesh and shattered bone. Simultaneously, the Lion himself reshaped Caliban's martial soul. He dissolved the complex, rivalrous knight orders into a unified iron structure under the Dark Angel's banner, imposing discipline and courting inevitable discord, yet overwhelming dissent with sheer implacable will and the siren call of galactic triumph. Surviving knights endured pitiless trials. The Chosen underwent agonies of transformation, genetic seeding, and the grueling alchemy of Astartes' augmentation, ascending beyond mere mankind to walk as angels watching the void. Luther, ever near, underwent enhancement, too, genetic tinkering granting strength lingering beyond mortal limits, yet forever placing him agonizingly short of true Astartes' majesty, an eternal inferiority now codified in flesh and blood, a poison seed sinking deeper roots even as the Lion looked outward. Summoned to Terra, El'Jonson stepped onto the stage of galaxies. Within the echoing halls of the Imperial Palace, the Emperor revealed the staggering breadth of his vision, the myriad stars, as a wilderness choked with alien predators and heretical corruption awaiting the Imperium's cleansing fire. To the Lion, the parallel struck marrow-deep. This infinite, hostile cosmos mirrored Caliban's haunted forests perfectly, a universal expanse demanding the same uncompromising eradication he had perfected. Victory was the sole lodestar. He regarded the philosophical nuances of a Sanguinius, the rigid constructions of a Guilliman, with cold disinterest, the path always leading only through rivers of blood and mountains of sacrifice. Returning to Caliban, he found his genetic legacy fractured, his legion scattered and dysfunctional, reeling from the scars of internal strife and inept, overzealous commanders squandering their potential. The Lion's single-minded resolve slammed down. He forged unity from discord, brutally blending the refined knightly traditions of Caliban with the ancient Legion creed, welding them into a lethal, flexible whole within the Legion's hexagrammaton hierarchy. New recruits, marinated in Caliban's harsh gravity, were plunged into this emerging doctrine, while the veterans were reshaped under his stern gaze. Wings coalesced like deadly organs, the terrifying dread, apostles of annihilation bringers wielding biblical weaponry, and the swift, lethal raven who merged shadows and surgical precision as scouts and hunters. With a force numbering 20,000 souls, the Emperor's 500, Caliban's nascent Astartes generation, and tanglers of Mechanicum Artifice El'Jonson embarked upon his next necessary war, the subjugation and gathering of his own scattered, wayward sons. Each shattered company was met not with open arms, but with drawn steel and measured fury. Their loyalty and worth proven only in the spilling of blood, the breaking of enemy lines, and the brutal calculus that demanded nothing less than perfection before they could kneel once more at the Lion's silent, relentless feet beneath the growl of galactic conquest. The air within Grammair's fortress hung thick with ancient dust, and the colder metallic tang of fresh sweat and blood, trophies millennia old watching with impassive stone eyes as Lion El'Jonson returned not just victorious, but as conqueror amongst his own. The echoes of chained combat, an hour-long storm of ceramite and fury against the master of the host of fire, Pius Caget, still resonated in the vaulted chamber, a brutal ballet that had solidified dominion. Before the assembled near 100,000 warriors won across the stars, his face unreadable granite beneath the ceremonial torque now resting heavy on his neck, the Lion claimed the mantle not just of commander, but of Grandmaster of the Legion, High Preceptor of the Order's Militant. Unity, fractured for centuries, brittle as a starved man's bones, formed at last under a single banner as cold and unforgiving as the void itself. His voice, a glacial rumble devoid of oratory's flourish, carved the Legion's grim purpose into their souls like a vow etched on tombstone. We are the angels of darkness. The pronouncement dropped like hammer blows. For us, there is no peace, no end but war and death. While we yet draw breath, this Imperium will not fall, and we will not know defeat. For I pledge every warrior, every drop of blood in the Legion, in the name of victory, no matter the cost. The oath hung, a shroud settling over them, binding them not in brotherhood's warmth, but in the freezing certainty of duty's endless grind, the heavy chains of inevitable violence replacing any lingering notion of camaraderie with the unyielding iron of shared purpose. For many, blinded by the harsh light of this clarity, the vainglory once sought in conquest vaporized, replaced by the chilling purity of the Lion's doctrine. War without compromise, duty without distraction. Victory was duty's product, not its motivation. Yet beneath the sharp new discipline, silenced by the Primarch's unnerving stillness, a murmur of unease flitted through a quiet minority, a phantom limb pain for dissolved traditions and the swift, unsettling ascent of wilder, Calibanite recruits. Their doubt a greasy smudge on the cold perfection, but a doubt choked back before that stoic, unnerving gaze. This newly forged weapon, tempered in declarations of perpetual shadow, was plunged instantly into the crucible of fire. Word arrived, pulsed across the horrifying gulf of the immaterial by Caliban's fledgling astropaths, carrying the stench of defeat. Chasm. An ultramarine garrison teetered on oblivion, driven into ragged fortresses by a planetary population consumed by madness and a monstrous plague that twisted flesh and devoured sanity, transforming men into shambling, ravenous ghouls clawing at the walls for 8 grinding solar months. History lived on Chasm, bitter history scored by the friction between the First Legion and the Ultramarines, threads of rancor that might have steered others away, but not the Lion. Sentiment was a weakness buried deep. Grudges were childish ornaments discarded long ago. Purpose, cold and untempered, was his sole compass. With the great warship Invincible Reason cleaving the ether like a black dagger, and a fleet of attendant killers blurring reality to slip between stars, the Lion plunged back into the raging sea of war, the Chasm system witnessing the sudden, terrifying emergence of death incarnate dropping from the terrible sky. Combat ignited before the last warp spume had dissipated. Drop pods became falling stars of violence, gunships screeching down like vengeful raptors as the Lion himself, a blade unsheathed in the cold void, led the first wave. At his forefront slammed down the implacable Dreadwing, 1,000 knights clad in foreboding armor whose very sigils promised obliteration. Masters of esoteric technologies crafted not for war, but for annihilation. Methodical, utterly without hesitation, their plasma streams scoured the fortress walls and choked tunnels, white-hot fire cleansing the tainted ghoul flesh from rock and steel. The Lion was a dervish of calculated rage, his great sword a shimmering arc shearing through the stinking, hungry tide, each step forward a silent proclamation of doom. Then, upon his silent command, the terrifying weight of the Legion fell, 10,000 Astartes descending as one, wreathed in shadow and defiance, an armored glacier grinding inexorably over the broken world, their advance a mortar's crunch of bone and a hiss of superheated air-bending corrupted forms to ash. The enemy, though driven by primal madness burning through corrupted nerves, shattered against the cold, crystalline precision of the First Legion's assault. By the wretched campaign's end, the rebels and their abominable flesh creations had been expunged, burrowed horrors vaporized, nests scorched into sterile ceramite grooves where life once writhed. When the battered Ultramarines finally pushed open the agonizingly slow gates of their last strongholds, it was with eyes heavy with suspicion and hands tight on triggers, the shadow of past slights thick upon them. But the Lion offered no parley, no shared moment of triumph, no vindictive gloating over the Fifth Legion's ignominy. Calm as a conqueror surveying an empty plain, he departed Chasm with the chilling swiftness of a rival, leaving behind only a stark, silent banner hanging in the smoke-plumed air-over fields already beginning to rot, a voiceless statement echoing across the void. The debt, whatever dark significance it held between legions, was paid in blood and fire. Consigned to silence. Finished. The latter days of the Great Crusade saw this newly tempered blade plunged into deeper, more dreadful forges. Under the weight of the Lion's gaze, The Dark Angels faced crucibles that seared endurance to its core, challenges that reshaped identity and permanently stained the Legion's very marrow. Malech, a vast undertaking drawing the banners of multiple Primarchs' Luna Wolves, Emperor's Children, White Scars alongside uncounted auxiliary and Mechanicum forces upon a nightworld dense with ancient, unsettling legends, served as a stage for the Lion's cold pragmatism. Here, the Legion's lethal precision became surgical tools cutting through formidable fortresses, their disciplined ferocity weaving seamlessly into the larger, complex tapestry of destruction, proof of the Lion's meticulously sharpened weapon shimmering in the dark. Yet, victory on Malech tasted bitter, steeped in poisonous secrets. Strange echoes pulsed from places deeper than worlds, resonances felt then violently suppressed, locked away beyond sight by the Emperor's own devastating will. The Primarchs who stood witness to the unfathomable, who somehow perceived the truth of that hidden warp gate blooming beneath Malech's crust, had their memories excised, cauterized clean like phantom limbs. The Dark Angels departed Malech not in triumph, but conformed to impossible silence, their considerable victories suddenly rendered hollow beneath the suffocating weight of a mystery they were forbidden to remember. A knowledge excised, leaving only a raw, unmentionable ache within the psyche of the Legion's soul. If Malech felt like a bruise painted over glory, the second and third Rangdan Xenocides were the crushing of bone exposed to monstrous hammers. In M3862, the Rangda, a xenospecies believed extinguished decades before, vomited back into the galaxy's northern reaches with fetid horror, death spilling across stars like crawling rot. Where the first Xenocide had been a trial by fire, the second and third were nightmares articulated in flesh and void-shredding weapons, wars of attrition conducted on plains of annihilation. The Lion led his Legion into this slurry of despair not as a hero, but as a figure born from humanity's deepest dread. His tactics became chilling legends, cold equations of death churned through meat-grinding landscapes. He fought not with rage, but with the terrifying inevitability of a planetary force, quiet amidst the universe-sundering cacophony. He became a silent sentinel rooted in the hideous sweep of the carnage, effortlessly displacing men with the mere weight of his icy, unbreakable presence. In the screaming, pitch-dark early years when the Rangda tide seemed an unstoppable maw chewing the galaxy's edge, his pride, vast and glacial, became a terrible beacon warrior followed, not from born loyalty to the Legion, but from the sudden, instinctive understanding that retreated existed beyond this Primarch's conception. To fight beside him was to know, down into the marrow, that annihilation awaited before surrender was ever thought. The savage decades of the Second Xenocide clawed at 9 legions, leaving sectors weeping ashes, multisystem graveyards marking the implacable advance of the Rangda's vile sciences and numbers that defied comprehension. The cost was a ledger rung red. 5,000 space wolves obliterated breaking the siege at Zana. And the Dark Angels, deployed at near full strength, bled even darker ink onto the records of woe. Battleplate crunched against biomechanical horrors under stars blinking out, shock losses piled higher than fortress walls, as they threw themselves with grim method back and forth against the abyss, finally fracturing the alien strength at the rim of human space, the very bleeding edge of the halo stars, at a price that tasted of Legion death knell echoed in every microbead scratch. But horror has gradations. The third Xenocide, climaxing in 890 M30, scraped the very barrel of despair. The Lion's Legion spearheaded the assault against the Rangdan fortress world of Vag, a terrible locus of unfounded evil, where 3 companies of the First Legion put down roots and bled themselves pale, making a choke point against over 1 million Rangdanura-shackled servitor zombies, clawing day and night. No sleep, hardly breath, but synapseft obedience to kill. Digging in sweat and spit for 7 glacial weeks beyond endurance while stars burned elsewhere. Void engagements over shattered Mora and the apocalyptic puncturing machine that became the battle of Mora-fed warp crackle with the ghosts of thousands of souls and Imperial warships melted into flotsam. Ultimately, the Lion cut path towards the heart, striding through Hell's wall, his great blade carving chasms in the ranks, shattering biomechanical horrors, preserving pathways to victory. But victory upon Vag came at cost unimaginable. The Praetorians raised heroic heads above the drifting ash and broken spines of titans and lesser crawlers. Silence fell like blade sharp enough to flense atmosphere. The Dark Angels' Legion oldest, proudest, greatest in early crusade number stood diminished to a skeletal tenth. Survivors gazed hollow-eyed upon siblings vaporized, brothers shredded beyond recognition. 50,000 Astartes gone, swallowed. Whispers slithered through supply drops and vaults. Perhaps they'd fought beyond tactical need, pushed limits just for recognition, desperate to prove Calibanite steel to an unknowable Primarch. Darker mutters hinted at cold intention. Lions sacrificing stubborn, inflexible Terran veterans in the charnel mills of Rangda madness, clearing dead wood to forge anew purely through Caliban loyalty. Truth or hopeless regret is war's eternal ambiguity. Regardless, it was Calibanite stock rebuilt the bones. Fresh intakes forged in the crucible of dark forest worlds, and nightly ritual ever mindful of instantaneous obedience to Lion and Emperor. Though lacking the inherited starship rigor and galactic scope of their former Terran brethren, drowned beneath Rangda soldiers' burrows, these warriors embodied singularly dogmatic intensity. Eager dwarfs of history, yet fanatics willingly accepting Johnson doctrine. War becomes rhythm, becomes efficiency, becomes prayer. They learned to embrace the remorseless void warfare mindset forged by Rangda puncturing human hope. They sought new planets stripped of vanity glory, claimed systems not for statues, but bases. Relic-laden chantries safeguarded secrets and minds learned killing, gnaw void regions border wild spaces, patiently seeking monsters stirring afar. The Lion himself stalked Sarish destined for infamilating squadrons dispersed patrol, sharply doctrinaire. Captains becoming competent predators working separate figurines down depths, new Imperium pushed hard frontiers ever darker zones swallowed light. Scattered cells hunting quiet annihilation. Yet mass grave stench proved hard to scrub clean. Victory won distance allowed reflections chill to bite deeper. By 899 M, 30 Guilliman grew Empire slick approach, earned boast swelling ultramarines, towered almost 166,000 pale towers battlefield numbers. For dark angels trailing bloody shoals, fragmented survivor old ways Terran remnant, now pitiful necks swelling tide Calibanites flush orthodoxy Lion demanded it, proved contest's psychic will. Reconstruction era wrapped shadowed identity slowly. Gundeck quiet fractured by low murmurs. Dormant hostilities Terran survivors poisoned slow writhing memory sacrifice. Secrets sown Malech bloomed silently above weapon rack. Rangda derapiating nightmares gripped mortal serf and transhuman, alike unrecognizable loss type curative grace. Grudges tasted metallic nightfall duty logs, examined simmering beneath conquest. Wolves remembered bitterly events carved mockery Russ pride brewed at Dulan, endured foundational hatred. Lion answering Governor Durr's outrageous tongue-muffling Russ, personally leading storm fortress knocking insult spittle off desk, before Wolf Prince managed name drop, charging orders vengeance hanging claim priority. Lion swatted petty temper aside. His strategy demanded hunting knight's best chance fade, without respect rivalry brooding acute. Russ arrived time smoke settling blood dry Lion clutching defiant head governor, missing atop shoulders unexpected coup ripping wolf ambition, thin strip parchment torn before best growl could begin. Brutal blow met Lion unexpectedly terrible ruining, calm emperor mind. Painted instantly explosive reaction, dispersed myth worthy legends forever clinging baggage. They fought, night day none weight strength lacking. Russ savage fury bullish integrity against Lion's impossible swiftness predatory reflexes, unleashed ancient Roth terra firma pulp titan suitability shattered beneath feet. Laughter broke stalemate, Russ explosively realized passing absurdity generations, throws over gambling debt. Lion lacking humor broke laughing jaw knife cut toppling bearish brother, actual expressed hate evident symbolism, woven thereafter forever irritated. Contrast simplistic legend suggests growing strife sprung deep quiet wells, fundamental misunderstanding personified. Fatal flaw within self-command versus vital open-hand welcoming, Hawks shared kinship. Beyond pragmatic conquest, thwackstick they became known. For Dark Angel's late crusade time remained ash taste, ear pressed endlessly reconstruct scattered self-identity, drain endless missions, swallowing heartfelt wounds others marched on untouched. Quiet half-understood shifts, turning proudly loud legion rigid quiet whispered articles fate. Late crusade sighed bitter wind reassembled soul. Whispers linger persistently, shadows encroach chronometer page describing price victory, barely legible beneath scratch marks lingering ghosts, silence impossible legion. endured unless loyal sacrifice through death's door constant angel of darkness duty, enforced purpose overlooked world peace seldom visible. Inside community vast melancholic constriction, progress demanding tears, unshed no public tranquility. Rangdon's scar proves unforgiven already. The bitter feud presented a surface simplicity that masked a truth far knottier, like ancient roots beneath a weathered tree. Lion and Wolf, Johnson and Horace, carried between them a grudging, claw-scratched respect, their rivalry less a font of true hatred and more a brutal testing ground for character and raw strength. They had faced the unspeakable nightmares of the Rangdon Xenocides side by side, weathered countless grueling campaigns across the fracturing galaxy, hammering a strange, ironclad bond in the forge pits of relentless war. That tempest-forged brotherhood proved resilient, enduring even the eruption of the heresy itself. For a time, their legions stood as staunch allies, a living testament that shared sacrifice in the crucible of conflict could outweigh any personal friction. Yet, as the Great Crusade ground towards its uncertain finale, a chasm widened between the Dark Angels and their kin. The Lion, his gaze perpetually fixed on the cold, hard contours of the Emperor's grand design, held the clamorous camaraderie of his brothers in contempt, dismissing the thunderous parades and the velvet-draped machinations of the imperial courts as superficial distractions. They were glittering veils obscuring the galaxy's festering wounds, hindering the critical, bloody work of excision. This relentless, stoic detachment walled him off in growing isolation. Many of his Primarch brethren perceived him as an enigma carved from cold stone, an unreadable monument to duty devoid of solace or shared warmth. Horace Lupercal, the Emperor's favored son, newly anointed War Master, watched this anomaly far more closely. Where others saw only an aloof, taciturn figure wrapped in shadows, Horace detected the sharp silhouette of a rival. The Dark Angels' martial mastery was legend, their custodianship of the ancient, dread arsenals of Caliban's Terran-born technologies undeniable, and their Primarch commanded an unflinching, monolithic loyalty unprecedented even among the legions of Astartes. This potent combination rendered them a colossal monolithic force, a fortress impervious to the insidious whispers Horace sought to weave through his burgeoning network of seditious warrior lodges. The Lion's iron discipline, forged in the lethal forests of Caliban, rendered his legion immune to such covert poison. Their pride was their shield, emulating their lord. It was precisely this unwavering, almost divine loyalty that crystallized the Lion's threat to Horace's grand, treasonous design. When the gilded triumph of Ullanor elevated Horace to be War Master, the Lion's absence was a palpable void, a deliberate consequence of being diverted to distant, grinding campaigns orchestrated by the War Master's own meticulous scheming. A calculated banishment, scattering a dangerous adversary far from the Imperium's vital heart. Yet the Lion's reaction resonated with chilling indifference. No public acclaim for Horace's new station, no private lament for his own perceived exclusion. He simply continued his grim campaigns, the momentum unbroken by Terra's political tides. This very indifference, this utter dismissal of the prize Horace coveted above all others, gnawed at the War Master's ambition like acid. By the time chaos finally ensnared Horace, binding him utterly to the ruinous powers, the Lion was starkly etched as one of his preeminent threats, a legion not just formidable in clash of steel, but seemingly incorruptible, immune to the siren songs of the warp. Their Primarch's fanatical, bloody adherence to unquestioned imperial duty presented an obstacle that could not be circumvented, only shattered. To cement the Lion's absence during the critical opening acts of his rebellion, Horace wove intricate manipulations of stellar conflict and false intelligence, desperate to keep the Dark Angels questing perilously far from Terra's burning hearth. But the Lion was a force as relentless and untamable as the primordial predator-haunted forests of Caliban itself. As the suffocating shadows cast by the heresy began their fell descent, he would emerge, keeper of secrets and first son, as a grim harbinger of final judgment, bringing the crushing, meticulously annihilating weight of the Eye Legion to bear upon the traitor Scions. His loyalty to the Emperor and his Imperium, a truth inscribed not on parchment, but on his very genetic core, would become a beacon piercing the encroaching dark. His implacable determination to see the Imperium endure, purified in wrath, would ultimately propel him towards the cataclysmic precipice at the galaxy's fractured heart. The opening falsipiece, shattering salvos of the Horus heresy, found the Dark Angels, true to their isolated pattern, distant geographically from Terra's political maelstrom, yet crucially poised through grim fate to mold the Imperium's ultimate destiny. Lion L. Johnson had led them deep into the fiercely contested shield worlds of the Gordian League, a stubborn confederation welding desperate human defenders with bizarre Xenos allies, all unified in futile resistance against the Emperor's inevitable dominion. The campaign, grinding on for 7 relentless, blood-soaked years, became merely another bloody feather thrust into the battle-worn cap of the First Legion, showcasing once more their unparalleled ability to wage fiercely independent, attritional wars of compliance, worlds broken not by spectacle, but by sheer, unyielding perseverance. Yet as the Dark Angels fought these brutal holding actions on the galaxy's ragged fringe, the insidious seeds of treason were being sown deep within the Imperial core, nurtured by poisoned hands. It was amidst the ash-choked ruins of a Gordian fortress world, in the grim year 5M31, that the Leonine Panoply's astropathic choir resonated with horrifying clarity. The news struck like a warp-spawned hammer blow. Horus fallen, Istvan III betrayed. Details painted fresh nightmares the War Master, coordinating a false compliance before unleashing lithiator bombs upon his own loyalist forces garrisoned on the planet's blasted surface. A holocaust designed to ensure no contested loyalties remained within his disparate legions, only the pure, unified cancer of rebellion. Cold confirmation followed. Angron's World Eaters, Fulgrim's ornate but poisoned Phoenicians, Mortarian's relentless, plague-flecked Death Guard all unveiled as traitors. The known universe shuddered and cracked. Comprehension blazed with icy clarity in L. Johnson's mind. The seemingly endless campaign in the Shield worlds was no accident of stellar cartography. It was exquisite trap, a grand distraction choreographed by Horus himself to remove the Dark Angels, Horus's greatest threat, far from Terra during the treacherous opening gambit. Though the Lion's legendary strategic intellect flared with the urgent need for crushing, decisive counterstroke, he faced a brutal, shackling reality. His legion was enmeshed in the Gordian campaign's bone-thick tangle. To simply disengage demanded a nightmarish 8 months at best. Any sudden withdrawal risked flashing like a beacon across the void, alerting Horus's keen eyes and swift blades. Yet inaction was anathema. The Lion would not merely brood in the face of treachery. His answer manifested as the Battle of Diamat. Diamat, pulsing tectonic heart of the Tanagra system and a vital forge world, held within its adamantium-vaulted catacombs the dread arsenals of Nightmare. Siege Ordinati. Colossal moving cathedrals of annihilation, engines capable of reducing whole mountain ranges, even the adamantium-vaulted walls of the Imperial Palace itself, to molten slag and screaming dust. Calculation, cold and precise, guided L. Johnson. Denying Horus access to these instruments of planetary evisceration was paramount. If the War Master aimed to bring Terra screaming to its knees, he would require the bone-crushing power contained within Diamat's forge vaults. Seizing those stockpiles could cripple the traitor momentum, impose critical delays upon the heresy's malignant spread. 15 warships, engines throbbing with restrained violence, were marshaled into a swift, precise strike force. Warriors were hand-picked, veterans seasoned in clandestine slaughter. Secrecy clung to the operation like toxic fog. Not a whisper could reach the War Master's listening ears. The Dark Angels moved with the cold, relentless efficiency that marked them since their resurrection, a long reach like a striking viper, venomous and swift. They erupted into the Tanagra system mere days after Horus's own traitor raiders had savaged the Xanthus starport, that critical orbital supply nexus looming like a skeletal colossus above Diamat. Their assault was breathtakingly surgical, overwhelming. Johnson's flagship, the glowering Invincible Reason, tore through orbital defenses as if rending gossamer. Legionaries, blades thirsty and bolters barking, fell upon the depot surface with machine-like perfection, scouring resistance before the alarm could spread. The traitor fleet commander, a faceless agent of Lupercalian treachery, faced stark reality: death or flight. Choosing retreat, they vanished into the void deeper than shadow, abandoning their despoiled objective to the wrath of the Lion. When the last echoing detonation subsided and the metallic tang of vaporized blood hung thick in the recycled air, the Dark Angels stood triumphant. The Ordinati were shackled within their carapaces once more, now bound by loyal command. It was in the stark aftermath, amidst the wreckage left by both the Lion's retribution and the traitor flight, that the shadow of Perturabo descended. The Iron Warrior's Primarch arrived like a grim siege engine given flesh, aboard the Iron Blood, shrouding his damnation within the facade of loyalist resolve. Ostensibly bound for Istvan V to reinforce the Emperor's battered defenders, Perturabo sought only to provision his battle group at the shattered Xanthus starport. Their meeting aboard the Invincible Reason was a landscape of subtext deeper than any void. A diplomatic veneer shimmered thinly over profound tension. Perturabo, the stoic siege master, inquired how El'Jonson learned of the Ordinati's true strategic import. The Lion laid truth bare, scalpel sharp. Decades earlier, in a long-forgotten coded dispatch from Horus himself, their existence was revealed, and he had calculated with chilling precision that Titans would fall before taking Terra, only Ordinati would crack its adamantium heart. The atmosphere thickened with unspoken challenge. It was the Lion who cautiously probed deeper, disclosing his private belief that Horus's ascendance was born not of discernible merit, but raw fortune, his arrival on Terra first by cosmic accident. A sliver of private jealousy escaped his armored restraint. Perhaps, had Caliban's forests yielded its son sooner, the mantle of War Master might have settled upon his shoulders. He sought Perturabo's tacit agreement, hypothetically, to support his claim should Horus be overthrown and a successor required. Perturabo, his soul already pledged to Horus and the dark communion of the ruinous powers, let no flicker betray his duplicity. Instead, he locked the Lion's gaze and gravely assented to the binding condition. The Iron Warriors would have access to the Ordinati as conflict demanded, pledging their devastating power would serve the loyalist cause. The Lion, pragmatic strategist above all, accepted the hollow oath. He never suspected these earth-shattering engines, seized at immense cost and risk, would soon roar their fury against loyalist battle brothers on the poisoned sands of Istvan V, enabling the vile treachery of the Dropsite massacre. Diamat and its coiled exchanges became stark illumination of the Lion's warp-twisted role. Eternally calculating moves ahead in a game where betrayal lurked in familiar eyes, his methods shrouded in such glacial secrecy and profound, unwavering pride it could spawn doubt even amidst allies. Yet his fidelity to the Emperor's Imperium was bedrock, unassailable. For El'Jonson, the path shimmered with terrible clarity. Horus must be shattered, the original template for humanity's error annihilated. Whatever cost the galaxy must bleed, he would extract it without hesitation. Returning to the cloying stench of the Shield Worlds, the Lion channeled brimstone into resolve. He drove his legion with renewed, almost terrifying fury, a master beating iron on the anvil of war. Every moment expended crushing Gordian defiance was stolen time, a precious heartbeat wasted away from the consuming inferno engulfing the wider Imperium. His daring stroke at Diamat had denied Horus a sword capable of cleaving Terra open, yet he understood with dread certainty this was merely the overture to an apocalyptic symphony. The fires of rebellion spread like malignant stellar flares, ravening unstoppable through Imperial space. The Dark Angels, bloodied victors at Diamat, found themselves snatched immediately towards a new, even grimmer maelstrom. Horus's strategy of delay crystallized into horrific reality, the Thrama's crusade. Thrown like a hammer blow against the masters of terror, the Night Lords. Thrama's sector churned in agony. Horus tasked Conrad Kurz, the Night Haunter, primal embodiment of cosmic despair, with securing this vital industrial crucible, its forge worlds the iron heart pumping lifeblood into the Imperial war machine. Yet Butcher King Kurz's monstrous directive exceeded mere conquest. His campaign was theater of deepest psychological trauma, engineered with sadistic glee to bind the Dark Angels in coils of horror. Planets screamed under methods refined in Nostromo's Stygian depths, becoming gibbeted galleries of flayed madness, worlds suffocated by dread, broken bodies, and even more shattered spirits hanging in grotesque communion with despair. The Lion, perceiving the grotesque trap, yet compelled by implacable duty to counter terror flung against the Emperor's subjects, drove his massive fleet straight into the deepening nightmare's hungry maw. Thramas unfolded not as war, but as a macabre ballet of predators, a war of torturous ambush and fleeting shadow, pinned between harsh crimson-stained stars and unending psychic howl. the lion strained to force curs into decisive collision, yearning for brutal, final resolution. But the Night Haunter, acutely aware his purpose was to bleed and detain rather than destroy, recoiled like venomous mist. He moved chaotically, violently unpredictable, refusing the lion's terms where legions engage like armies of old. Instead, venomous taunts flickered through the vox like spectral whispers, messages dripping with hatred, mind-shattering allusions and semi-truths designed to infuriate and unsettle. One such transmission froze decades-deep rivals further, coordinates etched across a dead rock drifting within the lightless abyss of the Sagala subsector. An offer of parley lingered in the bile, face-to-face communion demanded between Primarch kings, beneath a dying star. Pragmatism dictated the lion's response. He agreed to parley upon the grim, desolate plains etched under sickly purple hues emitted from Sathel's collapsing sun. They descended upon that graveyard world like twin comets, trailing shadow and wrath, honor guards circling tense, grim, silent sentinels beneath bruised sky. Initial exchange offered fleeting, brittle veneer of civility crafted entirely from necessity-tempered razor-sharp. Curs feigned persecuted insight draped in grim rationality, painting vistas of the Imperium's inevitable collapse, the Emperor's dream revealed as cosmic folly. Yet beneath the mask etched fear itself, beneath the facade of bitter sense flowed acid streams of breathtaking contempt. When the Night Haunter's poisoned tongue crafted its final accusation, shrilly labeling the lion an avatar of cowardice hiding behind grand strategic designs, whilst others drowned in violence, he commanded the restraint finally snapped irrevocably. Lion L. Johnson struck. His fist flew like forged thunder, slamming curs full across his haunted face, radiating shockwaves audible across the rocky plain, revealing raw red beneath pale Nostraman skin and cracked noble bone armor. Curs threw back his head, laughing wildly through a mouth showering crimson droplets like unholy rain, then retaliated with unrestrained animalistic fury, his lethal razor talons catching faint light as they flashed towards the lion's throat. Honorable duel exploded instantly into savage melee, unmatched in sheer personal fury witnessed since creation's dawn. Honor clouds surrounding them erupted horribly into priority conflict, as warriors once brothers locked within chainsword teeth, tearing ceramite from flesh, beneath scraping claw lamentation hate, echoing across the violet dust engulfed plain. Curs fought with the enraged shredded soul scream of tortured Nostromo itself unleashed. Wild slash moves attacking without pattern, nor restraint pouring all his universe's bitter pain toward killing his brother. L. Johnson returned fury-disciplined warriorborn, every blow punishing calculated strike, seeking vital weakness to break or kill, cold forever beneath his gauntlet edge. They traded wounds, ferocious deep crimson mist, erupting each head-snapping impact rocking bones beneath godlike frames, carving up the rocky plain beneath them, through sheer unleashed kinetic force. The brutal struggle spiraled to its death pinnacle when Conrad Curs slipped past guard exchanges like his namesake slinking serpent. Suddenly Lion found agonized gasp ripped free, his horrific opponent locking vicious thundersteel hands, tight squeezing, crushing, tearing at his throat. Vision blurred, narrowed into tunnel dark, closing vice tighter, crushing windpipe. Beneath ferrous grasp, unbreakable numbness crawled across Lion's limbs, darkening. Vision threatening final oblivion from deep Nostraman strength, dragging him earthlord towards monstrous embrace, welcoming deathly calm. Salvation remained inches away courtesy of nameless dark angel legionary, whose preternatural loyalty drove his combat blade, piercing the gap in Curs's stacked battle-armored back, scoring runic shield piercing, meat beneath hard ceramic plates. Paralyzed surprise bloomed, releasing weakening grip, instantly, only as reinforcing teleport flares ignited across Sathel's graveyard surface, forcing Night Lords dragging wounded, bloody, almost lifeless Primarch shapeless nightmare silhouette back into consuming. Stygian darkness, tedious obscuring group, vanished beneath their master's shroud, leaving the lion gasping bruised, crushed throat blood, choking his helm, gulping air, staring broken remnants, field all that remained testament to suffocating nature, birthright devouring gods of creation, embracing galactic apocalypse. Swallowing, yet unless perfection found resurrection, rescue final confrontation, awaiting inexorable loom across burning stars. The acrid tang of burned metal and ozone hung thick aboard the invincible Reason, a grim counterpoint to the tactical hololiths bathing the command deck in cold, shifting light. Below, the world of Thramas still bled, but the Lion's focus was already tightened on the new, chilling imperative. The astropathic message, fragmented and fever-bright in his mind, spoke of Peritus, spoke of an artifact older than stars, a whispered name that resonated with terrifying power: Tuchulcha. This sentient engine, a weapon dreaming of time and space itself, could not fall into the grasping claws of traitors. Its potential, a terrifying scalpel or a galaxy-scoring fire, demanded immediate possession. Ignoring the lingering howl of battle in the void behind, the Lion commanded his fleet toward Peritus, swords aimed at a prize worth any sacrifice. Arrival was jarring. Peritus wasn't simply a battlefield, it was a maelstrom of clashing titans. Imperial fists belonging to the stoic Iron Hands ground against the corrupted resilience of the Death Guard, their diseased hulls spitting venomous fire on each other over ruins of immense, ancient structures. Clan Commander Solyer Lacanth and Captain Kala's Typhon, locked in their own hateful dance amidst the planetary carnage, barely registered the arrival of the Dark Angels, armada descending like vengeful angels. The Lion surveyed the stalemate, his cold pragmatism cutting through the fog of war. Both legions were compromised, the Iron Hands by rigid pride, the Death Guard by terminal corruption. Neither could be trusted with the Tuchulcha's power. His demand, broadcast on open vox, was a cold order. Withdraw, silence answered. Obsidian loyalty and septic defiance met his command with scorn. His patience, always a finite resource, evaporated. The Lion unleashed his first legion. Wings of strike cruisers and boarding craft descended like a blizzard of jade lightning. Barrages ripped through vulnerable flank shields, boarding torpedoes slammed home, and Dark Angel's Terminators teleported onto critical command hubs. The coordinated assault shattered both forces. Iron Hands vessels, shields rupturing under concentrated fire, limped away, vox channels spitting digital venom at their erstwhile kinsmen. The Death Guard, slower and more ponderous, absorbed punishing blows, their plague carriers venting clots of corrupted atmosphere as they were systematically driven from the artifact's locus. Amidst the shattered ruins and fading plasma trails, the Lion secured the prize. Securely loaded into the deepest vaults of the invincible reason, the Tuchulcha engine was his. He felt the disdainful stares of the Iron Hands fleet, the predatory gaze of the Death Guard remnants tracking his flagship tailless wolves scouting weakened prey. Their contempt was dust on the scales. The game had changed. He held the engine. He held hope, however dangerous. Hope, however, came sheathed in blades fashioned from the warp itself. Activating the Tuchulcha to coordinate the perilous jump back towards Thramas triggered a psychic catastrophe. Like scenting a liquefying soul, demonic entities flooded the veins of the fleet, phasing through bulkheads in showers of ichor, howling their alien madness through pressurized corridors. Reality flickered. Warpsmith horrors manifested beside cultist crewmen promised salvation by chaos. The very decks seemed to breathe malevolence. Hard-won discipline began to fray under the onslaught. The Lion, witnessing the gibbering shadows clawing at his legionaries, saw only one recourse, a course forbidden and yet terrifyingly necessary. He reinstated the Librarius. Psychic hoods banished shadows where bolters failed, spells of purification cleansed corrupted decks. Yet the Edict of Nicaea remained a sacred decree, bastardized by Horus's treachery but still the Emperor's word. Chaplain Thoriel, voice raw with outraged piety, found the Lion on the bustling command deck. "Heresy, my lord. You break the Emperor's own command, we become like them." His condemnation echoed in a sudden hush. The Lion turned glacial speed, knuckles white on his sword hilt. The implicit challenge hung thick. "Necessity," the Lion stated, his voice scraped gravel. Thoriel pressed, invoking scripture, blind to the demonic howls silenced moments before. The blow, when it came, wasn't a conscious decision driven by fury, but the inexorable movement of a force of nature. A single, crushing backhand, powered by Primarch strength, struck Thoriel like a cannon shell. Bone crumpled beneath armor. The chaplain's body slammed against a bulkhead, a broken doll, silencing dissent in the most absolute, brutal fashion. The silence that followed was thicker than the warp's touch. Fractured unity lay alongside the corpse. The Legion felt the Lion's authority shift from commanding to crushing, a weight settling onto battle plate with cold finality. In the Thramas sector, now newly ablaze with the Lion's focused wrath, the Tuchulcha fulfilled its dreadful promise. Having been given time to calibrate and integrate with the fleet, It allowed eyes to pierce the Night Lord's curtain of shadow. Kur's hunters became the hunted. The Dark Angels struck not with brute force, but with the chilling precision of a cosmic surgeon. Fleets appeared where none could navigate, overwhelming isolated squadrons before vanishing in the spatial wake of Tucholcha's manipulations. Flotillas attempting ambush found death blossoming silently in their midst from precisely aimed lance strikes guided by tachyon whispers. The Night Lord's grip on the sector, seemingly unassailable, splintered like rotten wood. Ships died screaming into the void, dozens upon dozens consigned to the cold tomb of space. Then the Primarchs clashed. The Lion, seeking the heart of the serpent, found Kurz aboard his mangled flagship, a ghost of void-black ceramite amidst the wreckage remade by Tucholcha's spatial lashings. Their duel briefly illuminated the debrided command spire. Blade met claw, Primarch strength cracked deck plating. The Lion moved with brutal, calculated grace, steadily overwhelming his tortured brother. Kurz bled freely, bone gleaming wetly through rents in his armor, his counterstrikes becoming desperate parries more than attacks. Yet, the Night Haunter's hatred burned bright. Even broken, chaos whispered evasion. Superhuman speed fueled by pain and fury allowed him to vanish at the crucial moment, melting into choking smoke and shadow as his fleet, or what remained of it, executed a desperate, horrifyingly costly scattering retreat. Kurz escaped, abandoning sons to the Lion's cleansing fury, carrying only his deep wounds and an undying grudge. That grudge manifested as poison in the Lion's veins. Triumph curdled into bitter apprehension. It was almost predicted when the impossible sensor readings blipped, teleport signatures deep within the invincible Reason's heart. Kurz, a phantom carved from agony and vengeance, had boarded his tormentor's own vessel, bringing his elite Atramentor with him. Abyss-black Terminators manifested in critical engineering bays, the ship's massive spinal corridors, ventilation. Butchered crewmen, rent by lightning claws, marked their passage. It became a war in darkness more intimate than the void itself. Veteran knights hunted monsters through kilometers of labyrinthine corridors and echoing, cathedral-like cargo holds. It was a brutal grind, costing dozens of Dark Angels' lives and nearly all the Atramentor bar one. Seveter, Kur's lightning-clawed shadow, captured snarling amidst a mound of legionary corpses. Kurz himself, grievously wounded from Thrama's collapse, became a vengeful specter. He didn't seek direct confrontation, he sought carnage. He melted from shadow to shadow, a spider in the walls, leaving traps of phosphor grenades rigged to corpses, whispering chilling, maddening taunts over Legion Vox channels detailing sons' deaths. The Lion took up the hunt personally, stalking his brother through the bowels of the vessel he commanded. For 16 torturous weeks it endured. Each hour deepened the Lion's grim resolve. Each taunt, do their screams remind you of Caliban's forests, Lion? Will you kill all who defy you, just as Luther warned? Struck an audible nerve above the omnipresent hum of the engine and the occasional burst of bolter fire echoing from decks away. Precision traps were sprung too late. Corridors ambushed revealed only cooling casings and fresh arterial sprays decorating the gray metal. Kurz, powered by hatred alone, became a phantom, a ghost haunting the very soul of the First Legion. His escape, when it came, was as ignominious as it was maddening. Exploiting a momentary ripple in the Gellar fields during a minor navigational adjustment sparked by Tucholcha fatigue, he slipped away. 1 minute, a faint thermal signature near an auxiliary hangar, the next, absence. Not victory. Never that. Just failure etched deep onto the Lion's face. His prey, weak as he was, had danced his lethal dance beneath his brother's own roof for 4 months, mocking him, and had slipped free. The humiliation was absolute. The unfolding galactic nightmare offered grim context. Horus's true stratagem became chillingly clear: the Ruin Storm. It wasn't merely an obstacle, it was a stroke of hate-mongering genius, vicious and total. An entire tempest of warp energy, raw and sentient, seething across vital astronavigational lanes, sundering the galaxy with impassable tides. Terra vanished not just physically, but psychically. No signal pierced that roiling cosmic wound. Supply lines, extragalactic myth, travel. Impossible suicide. For the Lion and his fleet, it trapped them beyond the Emperor's light, halting their vital push against Horus. The Tucholcha, that key to space and time, strained against the Ruin Storm's chaos-saturated core and screamed warnings of catastrophic failure should he attempt a translation. Its power, immense as it was like trying to cut diamond with flint against this. Practicality overruled fury. Adrift, cut off, the Lion searched. charting motes of stability, seeking exit points in the void. Then came the call. Faint, barely an itch at the extremity of advanced auger sweeps, a harmonic pulse slicing through the warp's static squeal. Its source? Satha. Its nature? Alien, an utterly inhuman device known as the Pharos. It pulsed with a light unseen, unknown by Imperial science yet profoundly ordered. A lifeline glimpsed through the inferno. Against the whim of tides that drowned entire fleets, the Lion ordered the course laid in. The jump wasn't a single transit, but a sequence of agonizing, calibrating plunges. Ships groaned under spatial shear. Navigators gibbered, minds half-shredded by the ruin storm's wailing proximity. They rode the Pharos' light like a beacon in cosmic rapids, guided by the Tucholcha's frantic whirring integration with that alien pulse. Finally, stretched thin and bleeding vacuum from a dozen punctures, the Dark Angel's fleet ripped into real space. Ultramar. Gleaming capital worlds and the reasoned defenses of Robot Guilliman's personal realm. Ordered, intact, hope cold and alien atop Macragge itself. On Macragge's council terra, hope proved complex. Guilliman greeted him, stiff-backed, relieved but burdened. And Sanguinius stood there, a vision in white and gold, his angelic wings tucked, bearing the crushing weight of Terra's silence. Dawn-faced nobility masking fathomless grief. The Lion absorbed the brutal calculus. The galaxy savaged, Terra silent, potentially fallen. Guilliman's proposition was pragmatic sacrilege, Imperium secundus. A contingency, he declared, a new seed to preserve the Emperor's ideal. Sanguinius recoiled internally, the very idea a knife twisting in sacred responsibilities. Yet, reason proved more brutal than faith. Sacrifice was required. Under Sanguinius's luminous rule, embodying imperial sanctity unwillingly accepted, and Guilliman as war master ensuring survival, the Lion accepted the mantle of Lord Protector. It settled on his shoulders like adamantium. He saw the brutal logic, the sheer necessity. Yet privately, it tasted of ashes. Imperium secundus admitted the possible death of the dream. He focused on the responsibility, command, protection, the legion. The galaxy was still to fight. His mind unceasingly mapped terrorward breaches through the ruin storm, pondered fleet dispositions, anticipated Horus's next grand blow. Duty anchored him, but the shadow of failure clung tight. Unity proved as fragile as spun glass. Kurz, mere days after the Lion's arrival amidst sorrow and desperate hope, declared his macabre return not with declarations, but with obscene performance art painted in civilian entrails. He haunted the gleaming cities of Ultramar like a recurring nightmare, flaying Operos nobles, nailing serf families into inverted altars broadcasting slaughter over voxhails. Fear, tangible and toxic, suffocated Macragge. It was a violation, a deliberate desecration directed personally at the Lion for daring to believe he could be free of their shared past. Guilliman, righteous fury burning beneath his stern demeanor, allied against the shadow poisoning his sanctuary. Joined by the Lion and Sanguinius constantly patrolling the skies above the region, the Primarchs hunted him down through pristine boulevards and mountainous fortresses smelling of cordite and fresh blood. It became a grueling campaign of beacon signals and near misses amidst shattered spires. Finally, in a grand basilica overlooking a valley already scarred by orbital bombardment months past and offering unsettling tactical parallels to Peritus, cornered him. Kurz stood atop its apse, bathed in fractured colored light from shattered stained glass, cruciform shadows embracing him. He neither fled nor attacked. He grinned, cheeks splitting wide over teeth filed to points, throwing his head back in genuine, chilling laughter at their steely resolve. Then, casually, he pressed the detonator rune on his wrist. The world detonated. Packed cyclonic charges, buried deep centuries ago either by his agents or his rabid foresight, utterly rent the basilica's foundation liquefied quartzite. The soaring ceilings collapsed as one on the Primarchs below. Rockcrete rains, smashing into marble tiles, showered on whatever ground they stood on, crushing all sound beneath the continuous rolling avalanche burying them alive. But salvation came from the territory of nightmare itself. A shimmering portal ripped open within the cascading debris field. The tortured, device-heavy form of Barabbas Dantioch, loyalist iron warrior, reaching one gauntleted hand through impossible distance from Satha across the warp maelstrom. His was their only handhold onto anything stable. They tumbled through the impossible space to the rocky alien surface of Satha, gasping amidst the eerie luminescence of the Pharos they had chased. They lived. Barely. Kerr's mocking laughter echoed out into the vacuum of space as he escaped, shadow melding with the ruined landscape. The rescue was miraculous, pivotal, shocking, but the lion tasted only the gall of defeat. Outwitted by the archcriminal, saved by a grudge-bound Astartes, humiliation piled upon humiliation. The failure to capture his brother solidified into cold, grim obsession. For 2 Terran years, the lion hunted as Lord Protector, absent counsel, consumed by the shadow haunting Ultramar. Gilman oversaw the painful reconstruction of bleeding worlds. Sanguinius embodied the painful hope of uncertain millions. The lion pursued phantoms grimly, unceasingly. Leads proved sparse as ghosts fading in sunlight. Vox intercepts terminated abruptly after whispers of Pale King. Ruined observation posts hinted at flesh artistry only Kerrs could dream of. But the lion's patience was monolithic reality bending toward necessity. Then came the trail, clearer, Zepath system. Now drowning in the twin scourges of Lorgar's apostasy, and Angron's rabid butchers the gore-soaked Shadow Crusade. The lion deployed Farith Redloss and the Dreadwing without hesitation. Jathos welcomed them to hell undiluted. The word-bearers had flayed an entire civilization down to its corrupted bones, remade cities into vast sacrificial engines dripping with viscera, and resonant with perverted choral hymns ascending to the warp's uncaring thirst. Entire populations promised existence as offerings. Lush worlds stripped to charred basalt under the shadow of idols built from fused bone, where once soaring spires stood atop mountains of skulls. The Dreadwing descended upon Zepath as executioners unbound. Redloss unleashed the savage precision of the First Legion's grimmest aspect. Caliban's lessons of isolation, cold fury, and total annihilation directed against true corruption fired in their veins. They took numbs. Breached its gore-caked citadel gate, shielded by tectonic Werngans, haunted with screaming souls, fused forever to ceramite that pulsed with unnatural life. Street by arterial street, paved with corpses of both sides drowned in promethium flame, they advanced. The lion guided from orbit, demanding total victory for the souls sacrificed to chaos's jaws. World Eater berserk charges smashed uselessly against disciplined Volcate barrages. Fanatical word-bearer formations, attempting self-immolation to claim their killers, were strategically targeted, vaporized by Phospex's attack, reducing entire units to ashes, choking even the World Eaters. The carnage stopped only when traitor flesh and twisted metal littered every square kilometer. Num stood coldly, terrifyingly cleansed. Yet Kerr's mocking absence hung heavy amid the charnel dust. No whisper. No taunt, just nothing. Once again, this shadow vanished into the greater darkness he thrived upon. The lion returned to Macragge, his victory at Jathos deafened by the persistent absence of the Night Haunter within his legion's oppressive shadows over the gleaming cities they patrolled. Imperium Secundus built upon shifting sands. As Lord Protector, the lion served with terrifying focus, yet the very concept gnawed at the core of his unyielding loyalty like acidic promethium eating at old plate. To him, this noble shadow empire felt inherently ignoble. It spoke of contingency, of compromise on the Emperor's dream. Admission lurked beneath its ordered surface. His rancor infected interactions. Personalities were tectonic and grinding. Guilliman's reasoned statecraft clashed brutally against the lion's need for decisive, brutal cuts. Sanguinius embodied grace under existential lunging pressure. Yet his visionary endurance tried calming tension, only sounding discordant tones across the lion's pragmatic directness instilled over decades fighting the beasts of Caliban. Strategies diverged constantly. Resources arguments became personal clashes held in chambers where tension thickened air surrounding mortar. The fragile unity strained under competing visions upon the salvation machine. That tension coiled and finally snapped around the escalating insurrection poisoning Viridian, a prosperous region constantly destabilizing Secundus. Bombings shattered imperial crests once held above town halls, becoming scenes of fire and abandoned torsos, while the angelic statues weeping crimson blood. Guilliman preached measured investigation, thus patience. Sanguinius brooded silently upon poised solidarity, thus held galactic responsibility balanced so delicately. The lion saw only the cancerous cell. Kerrs will express through blind followers. Exactly as foreseen, exactly as orchestrated by another Primarch forcing, ruin onto order the siege must end now. He advocated orbital bombardment. Precise reactor attacks with minimal peripheral damage, designed to erase the rebellious nucleus entirely beyond recovery, cutting out the infection needing no surgical blades, only fire and atmosphere's damnation. Guilliman recoiled, shamefully recalling Horus. Absolutely unthinkable. Sacrificing Imperial citizens on suspicion spreading pavements across civilian life, despite the terror calls emerging justified false flag, or worse, consumed by despair couldn't torture innocent blood onto legions so foolish. Sanguinius seconded him. Compassion forbade such indiscriminate cauterization, suggesting extremes bordering upon madness, only justifying insurrectionists' cries. Overruled, outvoted, constrained by structures he saw as crippling, the Lion withdrew, simmering assiduously within the command confines they shared. He turned to his unsheathed weapon, to the Dreadwing, to Redloss. A chill order went out: scour Viridian, root them all. Blissful Alma Mons, jewel city within Viridian, suddenly choked of airborne debris clouded in strange rust winds blowing up from southern ash deserts as droppods screamed straight onto palace roofs like meteor strikes. Deathwing Terminators teleported into central squares, their Caliban green dull under sudden ashfall royal sentry towers, crumbled under thermic detonations. Precisely placed to disgorge heavy support squads, firing plasma streams, spraying molten ruin across municipal statues, Heketan land raiders fired into manufactorum complexes, simultaneously targeting suspected nest locations, utilizing intelligence culled from Thalax intercepts, correlated with travel logs, sifted constantly. Savants within hours, Alma Mons bleed not with rebellion now, but with war torn asunder, echoing back the ravages of Xathos. Amidst the grinding warfare, racking endless plazas choked with smoke, reflecting the sparse moonlight-broken metal beneath their boots searched twisting alleys, amidst collapsed transit tunnels, finally accepting the inevitable path upward, climbing the ruined bell tower to the observatory level, recognizing ghost scuffs on banisters as familiar to old scowls. The Lion found him again, amidst shadows thick with cordite and ozone faint light from far below staining the configuration of claw marks deep. Rockcrete origin point faint glow, reflecting off pale hated skin standing still challenging. Conrad Kurz. Their last battle exploded upon crumbling plasteel paradigms, overlooking a city hemorrhaging loyalism and rebellion asleep in combat. This duel lacked adornment. Brutal versus brutal. Personal. Every thunderclap collision of power sword against adamantium claw sent sparks showering down fragile structure, shaking foundations, already compromised. Tilt shifted into every counter. Death lurked inches away now. Kurz fought with mangled fury barely contained, missing eyes replaced by cybernetic lenses emitting burning light focused solely on the Lion. This time no phantom redeployment. This time only revenant fury meeting unyielding wrath shield smeshing, blows uncountable struggling for purchase against Primarch resilience, shattering everything nearby as collateral intimacy defined violence. The Lion's sheer physical supremacy inevitably won. He pinned Kurz. He disarmed him, slowly ignoring desperate savage kicks, punching through greaves, scoring deep furrows along inner surfaces. A crushing kick shattered a leg, not even armored, sending spasms across the Night Haunter's frame, collapsing him easy meat. His back pinned a crumpled ruin beneath Lion feet pinned, like butterfly specimen, against rockcrete ruins, beneath shattered faceplate his broken jaw trying to form words beyond guttural rages. Broken, he hung there, finally blood-slick limp spinal column, visibly ravaged beyond macrobiological endurance, gray bone shards, piercing now useless musculature, ruler of nightmares. Nothing but gristle spittle, coated against crushing feet, glowed, in anger of suppressed sobbing breaths beyond agony. The Lion's sword tip paused, hovering over Kurz, trembling remaining functional eye, reflecting past reflections of Caliban forests, where hunters taught shared skills, now warped transcendently into this moment, demanding execution long overdue, just one movement away. Yet the weapon faltered. Memories flashed cold order. Brotherhood tested. Emperor's design written upon Primarch bones, whispered old loyalties, severed not yet beat, away definitively masking traitor beneath umbral flesh. He couldn't end it. He hauled Kurz up, seizing bulk useless armor in one hand, dragging him upright, limped like hunting trophy pinned, internally screaming toward justice in triumvirate judgment gone awry, dragging a mad sobbing gagging laughing creature, wretched betrayal into dawn light upon Macrega's grandest chamber, bonding three fractures brothers. Beneath vaulting ceiling burdened centuries, designed to inspire unity, crushing Instead, asphalted husk dropped crews before sanguineous Gilliman passed buzzing with the crushing reality. His capture felt hollow pinned together through purest happenstance and darkness visited over opposing universes. Kurz offered no defense before his brothers, merely contempt resident upon astral planes, constructed a while from hubris pure monstrosity, shaped by emperor's knowing design, therefore blameless perfect predator, therefore suited should prey exist. Gilliman grimaced, the chains of logic binding chaos, offering nihilistic escape routes. Then the accusations slithered out poison barb. Kurz claimed the lion clutched his sword tightly, knuckles white, beneath chainsword scarring leather, silently willing antagonism. Away, ask him. Cruz laughed, lips cracked, scarlet pointing talon jutting bone towards lion, forcing atmosphere suddenly frozen thunderclouds, gathering intensely focused upon Gilliman's face, quietly crackling, silently opposed. Ask the noble Lord Protector in hiding how many bombing runs he ordered on Civili ASC when you forbade them. Peritus, before arrival. Alma Mons perhaps. How many void strikes massacres untouched cities? The lion charged, instantly snarling denial far too violently. Gilliman stalled, thin seething magma beneath stony calm, painted proudly above narrow-mouthed expression, brain recited tactical actions, unmapped potential truth sparking unacceptably, suddenly noticing subtle evasion in lion's fierce stare, locking eyes impossible. The accusation truth words hollowed vessels for death, or madman twisting lies perfectly calibrated. Impossible knowing, unforgivable doubting demonstrated actions, concordantly. Gilliman strode forward, overcome with absolute explosive disgust, ripped the lion's sword from his stunned grip, instantly slamming the priceless lion sword artifact of antiquity Eleutherios, unflashingly breaking the blade across his barded knee, impossibly defying Primarch ceramic, impossibly annihilating symbolic weapon, concurrently smashing implosion hope, demanding intense repulsion, expressed tearing away alliance final time. Sanguinius intervened inevitability, dissolving fragile tyranny, before blood removed the lion pure dismissal wing, spread casting 9 words like execution gavel crack, upon failing marble echoing, lost piercingly soul deep rot within consecrated tomb judgment ground complete. Exile. Failure as a brother, failure as a defender, failure as imperial son, failure echoing back decades, Luther turning traitors, turning years of burdens, unshared crushing back beneath untenable weight. Withdrawn ships departed, unleavened silence smearing muzzled engines, turning toward warp routes uncertain. Or was that immediate knock upon returning fleet restrictions, recalled simply abandoned invoked departure, cordoned audience dignitaries, conspicuously absent tideline, dragged against tides, rejecting foreign souls, slipping anchor chains above glittering ordered world, turning away forever unmarked celebration, bedecked fortress withdrew anchoring, fleet grinning, Nile shivered anchoring monarchy turning away. Aboard the invincible reason, retreating deeper than physical space could measure, the lion stood before the Tucholcha engine. Its subtle hum vibrated the very bones of the chamber, tasting his despair. Doubts, unwelcome ghosts he had slain 1,000 times, crowded the gloom. The psychic pressure stuttering out control panels nearby mirrored the tempest within. Images flickered behind his eyelids. Luther vanishing into Caliban's storm-shadowed forests. Chaplain Thoriel collapsing boneless against the deck structure, with no one to catch ribs cracking below the heel. Final splice display chrysalis containing Zahariel, each step vitally legion blood, laid down upon worlds, without number all leaving unseen wounds defining chapters, beyond unity shattered pieces, echoing diminishing returns, lost honor sinking crushing legion payload, consigning wholeness broken handles, lay legion allegiances, beyond fractured. Why hesitate finishing that mad broken creature cruise upon tower shards? Was it loyalty, misjudged kinship, strangled remnants of homo-Astartes affinity, or simply the Emperor's design binding limb from traitor flesh stretching beyond impossible violence? Questions churned without resolutions. No answers lived here. Only burdens compound pricing each passage guttural engine hum mockingly cert. He was done with Ultramar, done with Secundus, done with Rogel crushing. And yet, a molten impulse flared unbidden, utterly defiant rationale, collapsing essential journeys, conceived necessity systems, disentangling like frayed noose rope endings, strangling imposition. Escape? Reach? Denial? Undefined. Blistering need ignored Tuchulch's latent scream of spatial agony protesting sudden inflection, ignoring directional sparks flailing. Before the fully recalled fleet could properly establish navigators' banks dreaming warp routes abandoned harbor, he acted inside Tuchulch's thrumming heart commanding with absolute certainty, barely perceiving intermediary robed operative flinched chaos buzzing device hyperspaced, past tolerance rupturing spacetime tiers, without consultation comprehension. Spatial imprints brands reignited reverse, bearing physical won't fixation energy surge, so tremendous the ship groaned around him vessel straining. Anchor requiring planetary docking, rigging settling uncontrollably code meter. Focusing beacon reestablished instantaneous transit arrival point, defiantly absolute in intention demanding satisfaction beyond reason. Macrag. Not the cold emptiness of departure zones. Not the bastion command forts guarded by gold ultramarines, offering farewells already cooling. A familiar chamber deep within the realm of Ultramar's heart. He expected Gilman yelling assessments. Expected crews taunting spilled blood upon polished tiles once traversed. Instead landing platforms grinding new being here instantly regretted end. In the corridor beyond arriving footsteps rapidly approaching. An unmistakable aura pressing golden unexpectedly present journey elsewhere, concluded suggesting movement beyond glass. Sanguinius. His face suddenly illuminated by a strange blinding psychic resonance, searing through stainage last depicting rebellion survived numbering battles live prow bearing shining. Beacon tower impossible concept, burning stunningly hot building, within frame flame claiming galactic shadow. The unrepentant ghost light piercing, beyond the psychic storm barriers themselves revealing sonic proof guttural denial. Terra was alive. The Astronomicon streamed unfiltered pure beacon signal, honed upon temporal precisely, the moment flowing destruction convulsion, through skeleton thought impressed, showing plan, finally aligning meaning Terra lived. Absolute stillness overtook Lion L. Johnson towering silhouette framed within doomed hidden portal, unknown emerging amidst endings. Streaming possibly unrealized hope beam, illuminating warriors' shame and pride simultaneously, frozen razor-thin edge contemplation, pressing silent dread onto protocols, still resonant echoing vast futures, branching unseen consequences, amidst newly revealed pathways, obscured only moments before fading engine failure spastic mutter, finally becoming background noise. Revolutionary awe. The searing void between stars burned cold and merciless as the lion, Primarch of the Dark Angels, locked eyes with his golden brother, Sanguinius, across the echoing chamber of the invincible reason, his command cutting through the bewildered shouts of Ultramarines attempting to seize the Night Haunter. Kurz, slumped and venomous in his grasp, was merely a means to an end, a vessel of agonizing truth. Ignoring the demands echoing around him, the lion's voice, deep and resonant, heavy with the unyielding certainty of stone, pierced directly to the angel. "Remember, Sanguinius," he declared, the name itself tremoring with unspoken warnings. "Remember Conrad's own bleak prophecies. Remember the vision he recounted of his end death delivered not by our brother Horus in open war, but by an emperor-sent assassin, hidden, treacherous, a blade from the dark." The air thickened, charged with the horror of the implication hanging unsaid but screaming in their legendary minds. If Kurz's nightmare held even a sliver of truth, it blazed a singular, treacherous path, the Emperor yet breathed. Terra endured. Hope, however fragile, however desperate, ignited like a guttering candle in the suffocating dark of Imperium Secundus. Sanguinius stood frozen, transfixed, his own legendary foresight churning violently against the lion's terrible logic, finding resonance he wished didn't exist. Gilliman, his noble brow furrowed with strategy and cold realism, broke the charged silence, his voice cutting through the tension like adamantium. "What then of him?" he demanded, gesturing at the subdued monster in the lion's grip, his eyes demanding resolution. Kurz knelt, a parody of submission, offering only silence. The lion's gaze never wavered from his brother's as he spoke the oath, ice forming on each precise syllable, forging chains not of adamantium, but of crushing, eternal duty. "I swear it, I shall be his jailer. His darkness becomes my burden, his captivity my penance." Reluctance warred with weary resignation on Sanguinius's face, grim necessity hardened Gilliman's own. With that pact sealed in bitter understanding, Gilliman agreed. The frail, flawed construct of Imperium Secundus, shackled by misplaced hope and strategic impotence, shuddered into oblivion. United once more, bound not by lofty ambition, but by the iron bonds of duty and a faint, terrifying flicker of Terra's endurance, the Primarchs moved their fleets against the impossible. They would breach the ruin storm. The journey itself was a nightmare etched upon reality. The warp that frothing abyss personified seethed not just with mind-rending chaos, but with palpable malice, vomiting forth horrors from the darkest pit of the impossible. Demonic entities, manifestations of pure hatred and despair, clawed at void shields, shrieked unheard shrieks that vibrated the very spines of the legions. Navigation became a feat of suicidal daring. Stars flickered like dying embers through the psychic shroud, storms tore reality into screaming ribbons. Even the arcane wonders of Guilliman's Pharos beacon, their tether to sanity, sputtered and faltered, plunging terrifying swathes of the fleet into a suffocating, absolute psychic void lost, vulnerable, drowning. Yet through the maelstrom, suffused by the overwhelming dread, Sanguinius was visited by a vision, searingly clear amidst the howling chaos. Davin, the plague planet. The poisoned world where whispers and rot had first coiled around Horus's heart like a suffocating serpent. Where the galaxy's descent began. It sat before them now on the stratagem screens, a festering scar upon the stellar flesh, radiating a palpable aura of corruption, a nexus of the ruinous powers, foul breath. As the Loyalist armada pierced the final skeins of the storm and emerged like spears over the blighted orb, Sanguinius declared his intent. He would walk the tainted surface. He would confront the source. The lion recoiled, his soul recoiling at the stench of psychic contagion wafting from the visuals, his pragmatic military mind screaming at the tactical folly, the utter spiritual peril. Orders for exterminatus, for cleansing orbital fire that would scour Davin utterly from existence, hovered on his lips. In that suspended instant, a chilling realization froze the command. Unseen, unfathomable forces were manipulating them. It was a terrifying insight into the abyss within the insidious potential for even a demigod Primarch to be twisted down paths of damnation. He relented, jaw clenched so tight it threatened bone. Silence. They would descend together. The surface assault resembled nothing so much as forcing entry into a mad god's rotting innards. The air was thick, viscous with plague and warp energies clawing at ceramite plate and visors. Life, twisted and blasphemous, sprang from primordial slime, pulsating with perverse vitality. Sanguinius, heeding the siren's call of destiny scoured clean on Davin's poisonous altar, marched resolutely towards the serpent lodge that cursed ziggurat where Horus's soul was auctioned. Inside, he vanished from sight, swallowed by ancient, cyclopean stone that breathed corruption. He battled not flesh and blood alone, but the decaying warp-forged horror known as Madil, a trial of spirit and endurance that scraped the very essence of his being raw within the haunted silence of chaotic emptiness. Above him, screaming through the deep void, fleets representing the remnants of humanity's hope clashed with the corrupted might of Horus's followers in a vicious, grinding stalemate. It was here, amidst the flaming rain of crippled vessels and detonating ordnance, that Guilliman and the Lion were finally forced into the fray as one. Side by side, Armatura pragmatism and Caliban's implacable fury became a unity of destruction. They ripped into the void battle, their primarchal minds coordinating warnings and pushes with brutal efficiency. Their climactic moment came against a soul grinder, a colossal, blasphemous engine carved from suffering metal and living agony that had ripped apart whole companies of legionaries with contemptuous ease. Together, Guilliman's tactical genius maneuvering frigate squadrons to distract, the Lion driving his flagship, and escorts into a devastating lance-strafing run, they crippled the impossible engine. Guilliman's orbital cannons bit deep into its metal carapace, allowing the Lion's boarding clamps to slam home, securing it fast even as it writhed. From its vulnerable underbelly, slicing through corrupted conduits and sorcerous energy fields once shielded by its void scars, the Lion targeted the monstrous fusion core, detonating the horror in an explosion that banished the surrounding void into a temporary, silent vacuum. Then came the grinding push below, the Dark Angels and Ultramarines warrior hosts merging like tides of vengeance incarnate, driving the shattered remnants of the demonic garrison before them in bloody rout. Relentless fire overcame insane resilience. Davin belonged to the living, if corrupted beyond saving. As the legions consolidated, pulling back into the storm-riven skies, Davin's dark reflection swelling hideously below through the thick, toxic clouds choking the lower atmosphere. The command came, Borealis protocols authorized. Cyclonic torpedoes, bearing sacred flame the Emperor designed to scourge worlds, fell like drops of holy fire, piercing deep into the planetary crust. The ensuing firestorm burned outwards, purifying annihilation sweeping across the surface, reducing millennia of decayed civilization and unholy monuments into featureless slag boiling under the intensity of the bombardment. And in the wake of that planetary scream vomiting into the void, the impossible happened. The ruin storm, that immense barrier crafted by Horus and foul ritual, shuddered. Like tattered, infected bandages ripped from a suppurating wound, psychic stormfronts began to peel back, writhing and dissipating, revealing not a whole path, but a treacherous, fragile, temporary lane, a slender corridor vomiting toxic debris, but finally offering a burning path towards distant, imperiled Terra. Hope surged, raw and painful, but the ruinous powers were not done. Horus Lupercal, Warmaster and Archtraitor, had foreseen this slender thread of escape, this faint trail of salvation blazing through the retreating storms. Even as the United Legions gathered momentum within the cleared path, preparing the final, desperate lunge towards Sol, grim sensorium reports flooded the Invincible Reasons Bridge. Traitor fleets, massive, bloated with unholy allegiance, choked the opening pathways, vessels glistening with the oily taint of the warp arrayed in battle formation like weapons forged in demonic factories, blocking the throat of the corridor Horus had laid his trap. They were poised like coiled serpents, waiting to crush hope upon the threshold of salvation. Stymied, the brothers in duty forged a final desperate pact. Sanguinius, swiftest amongst them, bearing the terrifying purity of righteous fury, would take the fastest vessels, the might of the blood angels, and make the desperate run for Terra, trusting in his speed and angelic wrath to carve through the blockade's heart. The Lion and Guilliman, masters of attrition and devastating strikes, would launch their legions in thunderous diversionary assaults on the flanking elements of the traitor fleet, buying time and fragments of space with ruthless efficiency and overwhelming firepower, drawing the enemy away. Sacrifice intended. Strategy paramount. It was during these moments of brutal calculus, amidst snarled fleet formations, jockeying for position through fragmented corridors, still haunted by the ruinstorm's dying shrieks, that the unthinkable tore the soul from the galaxy. The Astronomicon, the Emperor's immortal fire, the psychic guiding light projected across the screaming chaos of the warp from the golden throne upon Terra itself, the blazing solicon of human hope and defiance that made interstellar travel more than suicidal prayer flickered. Flickered wildly, unnaturally, erratically pulsing as if ensnared by terrible agony, an erratic heartbeat against the tides of chaos. And then, with a psychic shockwave that vibrated deep within the bones of every navigator and psyker across the Loyalist armada, leaving silent screams on lips and bewildered pain in tear-filled eyes across hushed ships echoing shock in claustrophobic corridors, the light failed utterly. Plunging into a silence deeper and more profound than the void between galactic clusters since the warp began. Abyssal emptiness radiating despair. A silence that screamed louder than any explosion. Terror itself had lost its heart. Humanity had lost its soul's star. The darkness was not merely literal. It was the extinguishing of the last candle in a universe plunging into terminal night. Aboard the bridge of the Invincible Reason, standing illuminated only by the baleful light of distant stars, reflecting off the scattered traitors like dead eyes, the Lion felt the cold certainty settle into his gut like glacial ice compressing organs, freezing breath within lungs. There was no grief in that profound, bitter, silent contemplation, standing immobile above the tactical hololith painting the death of humanity's soul. No frantic prayer, only the crushing, unavoidable reality. Terra had fallen. The Emperor's dream, a burning aspiration that had consumed the stars, scorching its truths onto worlds and lives, lay not just shattered, not merely defeated, but annihilated beneath the filthy bouthial of Horus's monstrous betrayal. Void, absolute void. Where others might succumb to that yawning abyss inside, where faith might plead for impossible miracles offering just one last ember, the Lion's mind forged a weapon colder than interstellar space, a blade honed on the whetstone of utter despair. If the epic of man had crumbled, then the traitors would define themselves beneath it. They would experience comprehensive ruin. Their homes, their history, the very ground from which their betrayal sprung. Existence changed to non-existence, obliteration. Not vengeance merely, it was scouring. It was extinction, a declaration carved in planetary ash broadcast across eternity. He would wage a war of wrath so profound, so unrelenting, so cruel in its finality, that Horus and his cancerous legions would feel its echo resonate within their twisted souls even as they desecrated the corpse of Terra. They would choke on the dust of their annihilated origins. Thus began the passage of angels. First Chemos, Fulgrim's jewel, a planet of impossible artifice, captured on monitors blossoming suddenly, with targeted orbital impacts like infected sores, erupting across precious marbled, mirrored skin. The Lion watched through the hammered, silvered helm he donned as he issued the commands from the stratagem. Display screens reflecting hulls glowing in the roiling inferno below like funeral pyre, lights suddenly magnified planet-wide. His expression unreadable stone beneath the metal's shadow. Lithobreaker siege mines and precision plasma rods stripped its superstructures down to tortured bedrock, cities vaporizing in geysers of white-hot debris that cooled instantly in the void's suction into geological slag rock glistening under the orbital lance bombardment feeding the apocalypse. Toxic dispersal beams laced into the orbital detonations, energy envelopes salted the barren rock. Cinder, poisoned ground, a tomb world. Chemos was rendered utterly incapable of ever nurturing so much as a weed clinging persistently. Then came Barbarous, Mortarian's dismal fog-wreathed plague meadow choked with cosmic miasma, suddenly igniting as cyclonic impacts bludgeoned downwards massive kinetic obliteration, distorting the atmosphere itself. Even its atmosphere, long poisoned beyond mortal endurance, felt inadequate before the technological wrath unleashed. The very poisons were vaporized, consumed in the greater cosmic fire, replaced only by a radiation-choked vacuum, where no trace of atmosphere remained, reflecting sensortometer frequency mismatches from saturation bombardment. The planet scoured sterile of complex biochemistry entirely, boiled off entirely. A planetary oblivion beyond poison, absence. The pictures were cataclysmic monuments to genocide. Stars blinked momentarily brighter from stellar flares, reflected on Kraken light courier hulls, observing the destruction at a distance required for safety. Yet, standing while calculating flight trajectories of remaining targets upon the vast bridge filled only by the hum of vengeful machinery and breath held too long, the Lion felt nothing remotely like satisfaction stir within his hollow chest. Each planetary death scream, each incandescent viral cleansing, felt like throwing a precious relic favored from childhood into a vast, uncaring ocean sinkhole of despair to watch it vanish without ripple. A desperate provocation hurled into the void. Look what I do to your heartlands. Come, face me, answer this desolation. Stand before the Lion, no traitor fleet turned. No flicker of answering rage from Horus. His gaze remained unwavering, remorseless, locked on Terra and the Emperor's extinguished light. The fields burned. The void remained silent. The annihilation felt wasted. An unanswered cry in a universe that no longer cared. Feudal rage remembered ignorantly by its own tomb dust. Navigation offered a grim solution. The arcane auspex patterns of the Tucholcha engine, its unique signature resonating through scopes calibrated near desperation, offered guidance, deliverance. Corax's shadowed homeworld. Shattered remnants hidden within stormfronts converging in a slow boil. There they found not just the Raven Lord amidst the ruins of devastated defenses, but Lemon Russ and his shattered sons, snapping defiance from broken gaps in fleet squadrons. The Great Jarl leaning over Auspex links like a wounded but dangerous bear atop its crude hololithic maps. The Space Wolves, though battered almost beyond recognition, hulls cratered deep in places armor had long worn away. Fleet returning system-wide status reports filled only with grievous losses recorded, and the stumps of chapters that wouldn't propagate soon carried their scars like badges of stubborn endurance. The Raven Guard were spectral echoes of their full might, ghosts haunting a desolate deck. Istvan still clung to them like blood-dried dark, staining ceremonial solemn armor plates they dared not wash clean. Diminished, silent wings folding tighter. When the Lion's flagship cleaved the thin navigable corridors with unsympathetic speed, docking clamps sealing with ferrous thunder onto Deliverance's gloomy orbital structures, his voice, sharp as Calibanite granite knife blades, carried accusation into the meeting hall. He strode across a strategy table, littered with data slates listing losses Russ preferred ignored. Corax barely acknowledged except with intensely focused gaze, as if seeking hidden meaning within tactical scan patterns only he perceived. "Corax," the lion demanded, piercing stare boring into the Raven Lord's holographic gloom. "Why remain here in shadow while the Imperium burns? Do you seek only to preserve your refuge when your world demands justice?" Corax's black eyes narrowed, wounded pride flickering beneath cold restraint, hands tightening ever so slightly on the edge of the obsidian plinth. Before he could unleash the inevitable venom, Lemon Russ intervened, a ragged, thunderous expulsion drowning accusations in the hard stink of wolf fur soaked in chainal and stale blood. "Enough, Sir Johnson." Russ roared, stepping forward, a tower of defiance scarred yet unbowed, his normal Wolf King mirth buried beneath battlefield relics still attached to his thick belt by wire. "You point your sword at Corax, cast accusations of retreat. Tell me then, what do you name your passage of angels?" Russ stood tall, weathered features etched with the brutal pragmatism that belied his primal visage amidst reports trickling in of mass reactives loading nearby. "Scorching worlds, leaving cinders where cities sang." "What does that build? What bastion rises from your spiteful fire?" Russ's gaze, yellow as ancient Calibanite whiskey fire and just as sharp, swept contemptuously across the lion's stone aspect. "We endure as we must, brother. Survival isn't cowardice. My wolves live to fight another day." That endurance, ragged, bloody as it is, holds more strength for the long war than broken pride shattered on traitor shields. Russ shook his head slowly, a gesture of grudging understanding of the new landscape they shared now, predator to inspiration. Then, practicality overrode fury. Facing the lion with a bluntness entirely woven, his booming voice echoing between ancient stone columns, never intended to hold this constant drumbeat of loss. "Our wolves are depleted by Fenris whatever madness carved into our fleet, constant attrition breathing down our air vents, but we fight. This new Mark 6 plate," gesturing towards a nearby lieutenant gleaming inherently sharp gray metal in the gloom corner, "is strong." The artificery never slept, creating fresh plate on forge ships hewing adamant from rogue planetary cores fueled by collected asteroid fragments. "We join your campaign. Legions combine, we bring our wrath." The crusade of vengeance took sharp, brutal shape, equal portions of darkness and savagery linked by necessity. Corax, ever cautious, shrouded in his gloom, accepted only with grievous reluctance. With measured tones burdened by profound loss on Istvan looming like unconfronted specter, he reminded them all, the numbers were vanishingly thin. He could spare ships marked for mismatched engagements only. The remains of his legion, its tendons cut, its wings plucked near bald, could only lend a shadow of support considering Vidisign's cluster counts barely registering above skeleton crew markers on distant bridge reports. A token force. Pale remnant. Yet combined, the fleets, bolstered by the ferocious space wolves and the spectral remnant of the Raven Guard, felt undeniably potent, a hammer of vengeance on final assembly grinding slowly through navigation drills. They banked their course finally, ultimately, towards Terra. That whispered hope, however faint, however battered by the psychic scream of the Astronomicon dimmed utterly to nothingness since that terrible silent moment aboard the Proudstar, somehow ignited again, a treacherous ember igniting in the bellies of millions aboard 10,000 ships. Perhaps, maybe, leave fortress defenses as imperative parameters flash across my tactical scroll, alerting a gap in sensor grid's left flank movement detected, just once chance repelled maybe Terra. Lock the sublight drives residing deepest in ship cores. Push forward. Pray. The journey was a torment fired by grim purpose and gnawing existential dread compounds boiling still silently beneath decks. When the scarred visage of Terra finally swam into view through the forward glare shield, the impossible immensity of the spangled ruin shrieking silently upwards away from the ragged edge of the Sol accretion disk, painted upon the depths of space too large to comprehend as object-boundaried tragedy, resistance had been relatively light past the initial blockade zone. The global hololithic displayed the horror splayed raw across the Vox Imperator Auspixreturn projector main screen. Broken. Devastated. Billowing smoke trails rising from ruins, where once the Imperial Palace throne room once echoed with legends. The lion stood mute upon the obsidian bridge slabs of the invincible reason, staring down upon the cradle of humanity wheeling slowly below like a severed, bleeding head beneath cracked Vox station glass. Sickly amber sunsets, turning unmistakable corpseplanes into stretches of terrible, discolored hue reported from every continent's reading reliable within this sector. The fiercest void war humanity had ever witnessed had raged and passed. The siege was tragically, irrevocably over. Victory stood disemboweled. Terran orbital space glittered with the wreckage of heroes swallowed eternally by the cold void. Terra endured, but upon her crust lay mountains of dead. At its heart, no longer blazing, no longer roaring defiance against the unreasoning void, the Emperor's shattered husk was sealed forever within the silent golden throne, its once incandescent conduit to the galaxy dimmed to a cold, faint twinkling, the faintest of candle flames adrift in terrible storms beyond its fortress. Horus, the architect, consumed monstrous ambition, now lay crammed in charred molecular chains, cooling fast and utterly annihilate physically within palace grounds. His purpose turned final cadence within the meaningless void. Yet the lion gazed not upon victory, but upon a pyre whose flames consumed all meaning. Pyrrhic felt too mild. Glorious sacrifice tasted ashes thin compared to the magnitude of failure this victory represented. Standing rigid in the command silence thick enough to suffocate a mortal man just arrived minutes earlier with finally authorized clearance status to bridge, only the sharp lines of his jaw betraying the glacial fury beneath flinty mask and plate, and yet nothing moved beneath. Orders. Victory has cost these survivors their sole probation. Imperium, he looked upon fractured shards and saw a gaping wound. Its light extinguished, its soul mortally bleeding out into the indifferent galaxy. The lion turned slowly on his heel. His commanders stood arrayed around him, shell-shocked at the immensity of the ruin displayed even now unfolding data feeds endlessly below them on fractured, screenlit voids. He felt impossibly distant, wedged momentarily, still between strategy-refining sequencing scrolling over uninhabitable sections, showing nothing salvageable. His voice sliced the stupefied air, cold, devoid of immediate purpose, the armatures of purpose reforming instinctively, drills not fired waiting empty. Prepare the fleet. The command echoed unnaturally loud across the silent bridge, denuded of celebratory respite wreaths hung when before battle deployed joy fluttered. Their remains, pause sharpening within silent anticipation, held breathless. Work, to do. Not yet rest. Not here. Not amidst this hollow crown of bitter victory. The long hunt commenced. Deep patrols seeking scattered traitor fleets, hiding among asteroid graveyards broadcasting defeated protocols. System cleansing cantos deploying orders enforceable based on planetary compliance monitor. Years fled into the void, measured by grinding campaigns, small-scale insurgencies, quashed on worlds polluted irrevocably by chaos. Purpose relentless, punishing quest after hidden cancerous enclaves, festering across known galactic cluster codices. When at last, the instruments aboard the various major ship flagships detected the telltale signature, resolving into Green's lush, suddenly burst onto gray tactical screen upon nearing Caliban's edge space entry corridor, monitored by astropathic link automated beacon check routines. The rent in reality caused by the ruin storm had finally healed enough for passage home. But home held no solace. The ships, veterans of countless void scars, overlapping rendered hull shapes indistinct by continuous patching cycles, lay deep crimson warning codes on fatigue stress signatures on main stratagem displays, emerged clumsily into the clear void flanking the Caliban approach pathway. On the primary scanning screens revealing slowly, the distant globe hung stark against stars no longer obscured by rippling purple thunderclouds, staining them deeper than reality demanded. For Lion L. Johnson, gazing upon the distant green marble swelling like poisoned jewel dropped accidentally upon velvet cushion of space, rendered unbearably beautiful compared to monument graves witnessed elsewhere across galaxy recently purged. The approach choked him colder than void solid. He had left Caliban decades prior, entrusting stewardship planet-wide near-absent council rights enacted through revered deputies Luther trapped remnants of force he never could truly demobilize effectively onto mere planetary defense cluster orders alone ordered engraved by primarchal seal. Failed trust. Failed custody. Return. To fracture. Fleet sensors detected it rapidly. False signals aligning shield harmonics towards interplanetary cloaksphere projection, patterns quickly shredded revealing alien strangeness power signature. Caliban brightened suddenly. not with welcome lights. With deadly targeting arrays locking onto fleet locations, with alarming speed previously unheralded corners of the planet, suddenly erupting firelight representation on Helistium. Planetary defense, law strike patterns suddenly spat coherent energy tearing, heavens suddenly utterly silencing fleet-wide cheering, abruptly displayed across bridge overlays, removing all celebratory voice cues by emergency filter protocols enacted. Void shields screamed impact alarms across ships, unpredicted suddenly accelerating defenses, hadn't identified aggression probability scales, spiking momentarily beyond sustainable barriers. Home fired. Its own defenses hurled destruction upon returning saviors. The sheer insanity of betrayal resonated deeper than any void cascade collapse, breath momentarily paralyzed bridge voices, bullhorn cracked under rapid-fire incoming accuracy, reports impossible cancel, order silent static pause, filled bridge weight crushing. It slammed into warriors who had endured the siege. Upon souls already ravaged by Luther's earlier betrayal, recorded now indelibly within fleet history archives. The lion's voice, 13 centuries later, still echoing darkness drowns, faint joy finally suppressed utterly in that moment of traitor illumination, finally confirmed, sheared the stunned air cultivated tightly aboard the vessel, filling calm channels, deep interior immediate shake. We discover why. Ice daggers puncturing speech. Investigation confirmed deepest terror. Reports filtered back on tight beam channels, recoded repeatedly to prevent interception, revealing layers of horror system-wide, unspooled within archive data churn deeper, in memory cores, than required, accessible only to Primarch tier authorization. Isolation constructed, not protection fence. Cage. Only necromantic taint took root instead beneath physical greenscape, shows only green self-deception intact. For Caliban, fractured long before Ruinstorm barrier fell truly physical. Decades adrift. Luther's heart rotted, unseen verdant night parade crusts obscuring decay cycle. The lion's trusted teacher, brother, martial companion, ever close witness to taciturn moods, ever watchful unknown, finally nursed bitterness and jealousy poisonous as worldleaf sap sweet scent, Hephaestos, stockpiled suddenly overflowing. Discord sown, unaware disseminated quietly amongst remainder order garrison, built by Lion himself. Forget keeping beasts packed, now spinning wild dogs, borrowing fratricide direction from spectral whispers, echoing ruinous power claws, inserted like needles perceiving opportunity, exploited unfiltered habits, complaining drunk idly during festivals, suddenly became immense disease, vector billions dead unknowing. Chaotic gifts corrupted defenses, beyond salvation, trusting brother turned destroyer, designed planetary collapse, internally transcription errors interrupting clarity. Lucifer's legion reforged themselves willingly, almost unnoticed, into clockletch damned fists, prepared to seize Caliban under psychotic traitor banner, rules forgotten interpretations, merely legion's aggregated madness combustive primer. L. Johnson held judgment passed within. Methods cold iron. First silence the guns. Fleet firepower, precision honed on Mechanicus Forgebreaker, sieging widely scattered orbital emplacement locations, detailed thrilled sudden perdition coordinates, discovered surface-side intelligence local aspects, tracking lock improbable accuracy, detonating ferrocrete laid deep millennia back, breached locally unleashing flood, that rippled elsewhere, allowing pinpoint fleet main volley fire execute orders. Broad spectrum bombardment, followed immediately authorizing any structure-definable habitation zone infrastructure, supportive shedding orbital counterattack, now eradicated effectively. Caliban crumbled under missile storm geysers, screaming molten flame elemental fury, designed rupture continents, split despite planetary mass saving shield critical systems, finally failed catastrophically cascade locks, failing all bridges at once. Plasma fire turned legendary forests, interwoven perfect ecosystem, symbiotic equilibrium, into instantaneous all-consuming firestorms. Swept rivers boiled away, leaving desiccated canyons, marked surface, suddenly identifiable, initially as topography marker Lake High Cane, now merely depression expanded by geothermal shockwave, beyond initial target calculations. Fortresses, hallowed halls train their origins upon peak spine backbone continents, vented atmospheric concussion waves levels, leaving dust, powdered stoneworks tracing foundations, settle slowly snow blanket gray ash. Death, rapture, seismic wavefront pulverized history, beneath scorched tectonic shuffle, accelerated planetary regret. Within this crackling ruin devoid calm mushroom clouds, ascending incessantly choked skies darkest crimson, filtering scarce sunset fragments indiscernibly. The lion descended gently activated grav systems reported stabilizers, burned deeply hot landing struts, complaining impossible stress acting upon cliff faces, eroded faster than gravity generators, compensated lowering leader agonizingly slow onto smoldering dust spreading fast, where plateau once focus mechanism platform recorded stabilized location, normalized impossible lifting engines, loosing lift, suddenly sinking meters violently. He marched his honor guard angels sealed within armor hard indifferent death incarnate, now turning scorched earth footprints forming glacial harbinger tracklines, dying planetscape, made unrecognizable cliffs melted slag, through ruins unrecognizable mountain survey established tactical camp, push defenses, system-wide denied starting point identifies planet, says gone already rendering moot patrol, orders hissing barely comprehended architectural mockery, perhaps once Valerie defense nexus. Fitted with mechanisms, they arrive almost upon unrecognizable tangle superstructure lean, collapse trajectory, imminent Leoshield generator heat fracture, exposed like ribcage rotted animal corpse beneath twin suns. Centerpiece this annihilation stood the Order's fortress monastery towering monument ambition, flayed naked flames, greedily consuming final structure resilience, remaining briefly surveyed in tactical schema tendril advances, via data delta stream encryption impossible break, immediately consistent conclave calls, echo chamber ripple interface. The Hart L. Johnson had forged steel union-honed blade against the beast-infected darkness upon Caliban, was naked skull, exposed elements, dead planet decay markers, deep within gray radiation, falling as acidic snow overtopping foundations, tip streams melting rivulets radioactive sludge flowing downhill carving valleys, unheard depth, resist atmospheric inflow planexidation. It became an arena battle brother killing brother, upon bones Longpatron Saint Ruin, viewed simultaneously glory hunting ruined home. Deep within labyrinthine dungeons, consecrated training pits echo memory, shorter days straining muscles, beyond mortal limits clang defiance shouting echoing. Vast vaulted halls held dark memories, warrant soul-shaking solidarity echoes. Past years darkening future, unlock crumbling memories. Labyrinth deeper echoes, combat clashing echoed, distantly mad laughter stumble cracked monoliths, vitrified rubble pile identification, path register squad, Mano Ever systems report warriors lost possible. Seismic instability trigger, collapse probability high stay alert directions, scan mobile threats unidentified calibration, spikes continuous energy fluctuation, continual assume chaotic influence, greater scale deeper structure, fighting article verb tato lifetime remember, trapped suffocating data feed endless gray scrolling intersecting positions, flashing indistinguishably tactical applications, fuzzy rendering deep penetrating gamma ray scanning masking, deep atmospheric formation dense. Particulate structural collapse registering deep solid object moving faster organic rhythm patterns alone, dust settled momentarily perceptible transient calm, found opponent locked immobile walls compressed around intensely illuminated bubble local environmental twisting visual rotator, cracking structural reinforcement field failure. Confrontation, frozen iconic tableau atop stirring deeper dustweb patterns. The lion faced Luther. Guiding hand turned to chaos-kissed fist. Black bile hatred twisted Luther's ascendant features unrecognizable comfort gone. Flagship signals bearing unreadable screaming purpose. Corrupted realized Luther wasn't merely grew strong. Warp essence pumped his frame nearly impossible contradistinction order. Imposed insane kinetic force secrets order bestowed chaos amplified monsters representative Horus, favored now unleashed within herald destroying foundations, building lie siege engine destroying foundations, forever home. Luther stood empowered terrifying near equal appealing, sympathetically primal brothers, rage commanding emotional currents impossible reconcile, denied truth hands claws crackling. Their clash scarred all remaining reality within shattering church structure. Neither triumph. Impossible relativistic strength carving plasma flow patterns, suddenly charted gravity distortion, charts adjacent desks, frantically updated lateral concrete cracking radiating impulse, wave tangible grinding particle physics, opposite directions approximately force match buffer systems, failing seismic countermeasures, max output insufficient wave, indicating structural instability, deep subsurface plate rendering structural integrity, compromised servicing rupture, soon planned evacuation. Clear sometimes unavailable primary signaled retreat logic, revised collapse probability 8 to 7%, avoid immediately move. Exquisite timing blows, traded ignored crumbles ceiling fall suppressing personnel. By debris jamming exit vectors isolated rescuers, mining deep sensors, tracking commander level disappearing behind rebar shifted concrete dust aerosol cloud dense, under ultraviolet track markers, suddenly resolves horror depths, still grappling solid. Lion's energon blade, unleashed wrapped force field crackle, clamping impact organic shrieking, distinct metalloid splinter breaking vital Luther, staggering, falls slightly exposing. Arm flailing gap glowing kinetic tendon, severed deep weeping all landscape. One opening perfectly timed strike, disappeared closing deeply gut ripped chaotic plate, thick energy gorge, carved deep spilling unnatural essence, shimmering impossible colors onto distanced command throne impressions, captured centuries back, when fortress novel concept unified planet. Perhaps impossible reality, warping blow psychic projection, momentarily flares, shattering entire bulkhead sequences, exterior battle mood deepen, revealed stars tear rift reality strange to those viewing command. Back on reckoning Faust detached, feeling helpless observer bubbles float registry, blind channels audio only distortion, alerts canceling speech melting sequence architraves, suddenly collapse both forced dodging jump backward, crashing separate cubic meters, liquid rubble molten glass imprint streams, flowing gravity pull ignored impossible magical energies twisting. Intone the lion held the killing stroke armed poised instant armor, inertial jump engines, triggered charge thrusters screaming microsensors. Reporting surface instability, microphone fritzing momentarily skipping words, might explain hesitation fault uncertain, perhaps not streamed communications, feed became static, filled impossible comprehend intention moment. Intervene destiny, unreliably shattering crystal empathy thin strand missed wraith, still calling back loyal night childhood innocence, years depth ingrained impossible extinguish, truly strike home. That final hesitation brother amid tangled sludge background, collapsing layered masonry crushing Voyager stillness raiders, in route seeking. Find roots improbably intact key sections within Caliban root core section, intel seek escape fails found. Hesitation cold weapon scream magnetization, helmets popping magnetic bleed effect shifting, particulate mist shifting, breezeless cycles Luther consumed terrible warp fire, voted erupted involuntary psychic assault sorceress shriek unleashed depths chaos desperation, unbearable anguish riddled mind tearing fabric space, itself, momentarily apart pressure differentials, sucking air rushing gaping void sucking trajectory, lion impossible, react radically wrench centrifugal force twisting impossible. Absurdity sheer mind-warping reality mingling, power impossible caliber physical endurance, weapon armor, shredded poorly visible stream, overwhelming demonic streamer tearing, plates helm ridges dislocation neck guard, rend gaps tearing underneath jetpack systems. Guillotine cable routing snapping find momentary wrench, escape impossible scale scream, echo bridge warning main, hull structural decompression. Occurred adjacent module, instantly containing through emergency, engineering override spilling massilver mass flow vents, shuddering shipwide enthusiasm, crashed discomfortingly. Physical systems failed prolonged nanotechnology collapsing continents, internally, while impacts reported as metaphysical assault, sent him reeling crashing tons ablative superstructure, pulverized vitally organ-crushing penetration wounds felt bone inward curving internal systems, short unpredictably spitting paradox spikes into consciousness. Mortal wounding consuming Primarch mass. It bought mere moments probing pain scream impossible silence retina, power armor retracting pain scream, barely registering assaulted internal liquids, escaping regulated carefully recovery systems, failing cascade. Siege research registers, Luther sudden screaming collapse agony clarity returning, suddenly intoxication, chaos lifted vile veil transparency, unveiling soul true depths horror witnessed hand, shaped nightmare tour worlds, knowing rage now plain infant shock manipulative whispering gods, planted seeds, legitimate grievance bitterness, fed unlimited horrors realities, open fears, shattering fragile ego like brittle glass, exploding vision deeper universal pain starvation. Horrified clarity encompassing monument ruin, spanned threadbare ether wailing, despair impossible articulation guilt, collapsing humanoid shape shaking broken plate useless. Luther fell not war cry broken repentance despair, so profound not choked absolution, impossible utter rumble surrender collapse monument reality, implodes surrounding calamity secondary explosion, destabilizes atmospheric containment field harmonics completely collapsing. Chaos God's favorite plaything slipping leash absolute board apocalypse, went deep withdrawal limb manifestation, scream chronological fracture deep time earthquake, impossible magnitude splitting planet, with impossible sound, craving fill mind emptiness chaos puppets angered playthings, rebellion, suddenly snatches entire planetary mass rip geology fabric space-time, smashing Caliban into slamming tectonic fragment, asteroid spray screaming into luminous vortex, shrinks rapidly intensely. Radiating utterly consuming visible spectrum, removed existence wormhole closes unechoing silence mineral slag rocks, slowly tumbling debris ring forming cooling. Orbit silent asteroid belt grief, forlorn instantly recognizable, by trailing methane ice condensate traces, vortex remnant signature, precise dimensional slip gravity harmonic deep resonance. Gradually dampening measurable energy decay curve denoting major event, cascading minor overlaps stabilize within decade. Predictable patterns observable astrophysics, extinction. Stunned fleet penetrate dispersed debris field sensor flutter searching electromagnetic signature. Amid radiation burns, residue fade clean asteroid chunks, sparsely spread surgical strike feel, almost religious purity orbital path, established garrison ships, establishing cordon geosynchronous observation, lock the largest fragment, returned intact diagnostic scans, hazardous conditions, rising microparticle impacts aboard sensor suites, finally cutting through thick gamma fog glacial scanning. Temple's potent shielding reactions, radiation, dead zones, detectable energy field containment, suggesting origin intensely unique layered shields, held strong meteorids glancing harmlessly every time. Upon that final, unscathed rock heap rubble stone landscape, absent life atmospheric pressure minimal, cold vacuum maintaining system, root survival inside impossible cluster, data points aspect ratio, consistent orders monastery core, structure managed impossible hold atmosphere bubble golden filters, pulsed weakly irregular punctuate darkness, static reads, brief oxygen nitrogen signals, maintained internally survival improbable fragments, mount rescue attempt possible teleport anchor, derived from. Shielded spire beacon pulsing rapidly decay pattern chaotic intervention, residue wash detectable signals, spurious vanish reappear unreliable coordinates, allowing ash black recon 0, 4 finally breach frozen doors, sealed impossible residual maglocks, grinding driven back heatax emergency, breaching charges impossible lesson failure calculated. Several brothers breached surface carcass traumatic gravity fluctuation, encountered sensor ghosts, everywhere red unsure entering contamination, protocols extreme beckons document, enigma, data acquisitor priority dashboard, begun they found ruin. Inside mirroring cracked columns, shattered frescoes tell imagined story, no names remembered chiaroscuro lighting, simulated fractured scythen layers, dust, thick fragile brittle shutters, vibration cessation tremors ceased deep core silent, now ear ring human soldiers suits, encumbered search pattern grid Weisscamp, emerge central chapter hall grand pulviated monument macroscopic altar, defaced origin plausible space then. Luther. Filthy tatters robe armor brittle radwest, chipping away beneath feet scream scraping acoustics, rebound impossible echo chamber, recognize quiet consistency, hum shields, no acknowledgement rational words, emitted constantly ripple, through aircom impossible understand scraps, silent glitch-filled whispers, streaming ancient Calibanic dialect fragments, weeping remorse disjointed incoherent prophecy, garbled insertion emperor vengeance, spirit sentences, cutting off perpetually shift clear signal battery. Drain mysterious entities flow scene terminate immediate extracted termination ordered received reluctantly team withdrew senseless ramblings haunting vessel the voyage vanquishers hours later lucid moment shattered vision sudden gaze hold Sergeant Odell sharp suddenly resonating clarity impossible fractured tone record. Watchers. Watcher. Shapes. Took him. Held shadows, said Will. Promised return. Throne moon. Dark night salvation future. Lionel Johnson, understand. Morrison will bring him. Wait, only wait. Archival data strictly restricted fog madness. Swallowed him once more collapse. Spasming addressed theories later psychic refraction. Possible meaningful far cryptic sane context. Dreamt death cry resonate fleet personnel incapable offering answers scans. Fragments rock nothing biological registered Primarch level signaling. Vanished impossible sensor. Sweep impossibly hurts logic emotionless combat shuffling order. Established governing surviving ordos, precinct commanding personnel house claim. Remains planetary core, hearken legends deep forgot ancestors, wisdom perhaps answer Luther, cried into dust swirl vacuum haunting death. Occurs legionaries gathered silence, resonated across fleet bridges broken Primarch. Lost martyr fallen undetected surviving legends scratch perception disorder. Debate memo deep encrypted database division proposals. Dismissed quickly futile search parties resigned attrition. Eating away edges fleet formation. Understood they annals incomplete built grief. Mortal. Enigma carved cosmic fabric war, dust falling slowly across 60 chaos worlds, unending cyclamoon hung debris encircling system, holding monument forever broken. The truth gnawed at the watchers, those diminutive, silent guardians, a venomous secret buried deep beneath layers of silence and ancient stone. He remained, the Lionel Johnson, sunk deep in a slumber beyond life yet not death, held within a hidden sanctum nestled in the rock's deepest, unknowable heart, a place not even the most trusted battle brothers suspected. There he lay, a weapon sheathed in stasis, waiting for the Emperor's direst need, for the day of reckoning he somehow foresaw would inevitably shriek across the heavens. Yet for the dark angels themselves, the acrid ashes of Caliban choked their souls long after the world ceased to be. Great rents in reality had scattered their traitorous kin, Luther's brothers-in-arms, flung across time, and the screaming void by the warp storm that had obliterated their home. Each carried the indelible brand of betrayal upon their souls, forever stained. These fallen angels became the horrid, indelible legacy of the First Legion, a festering wound upon its honor, a shame so profound no ocean of time could wash it clean. From the very moment the fires dimmed over Caliban's grave, the dark angels swore a silent, burning oath beneath the cold stars. They would hunt the fallen, scour the stars for every last traitor, drag them to justice, and purge the stain with flame and steel, no matter the millennia it consumed, no matter the bloody cost extracted. Yet the truth is a slippery, poisonous thing. Whispers, insidious and treacherous, seeped through the cracks in their Fortress of Silence tales most famously voiced by Marier Estellan, a captured fallen, spun of the lion's perceived hesitation. Estellan spat accusations that the Primarch had watched the heresy unfold like a gambler calculating odds, holding Caliban back until he saw which Titan, Emperor, or Warmaster would stand victorious. According to this bitter exile, the lion abandoned them out of cowardly fear that the loyal garrison itself might rise against him for this perceived faithlessness, leaving Caliban prey to darkness. The defenders abandoned, their minds fertile ground for Luther's heresy. Were these cruel truths ripped from a tortured conscience, the venom of a soul damned and seeking company, or the purple cracks of a mind shattered by guilt? This bitter seed of doubt took root, a constant, sharp thorn within the chapter itself, never resolved. What stood undeniable was the vast, empty throne left by the lion's vanishing, a void wider and darker than any starless realm, impossible to fill. Robbed of their father, their Primarch shrouded in enigma after Caliban's cataclysm, their legion fractured, their honor befouled by the treachery of their own kin, the dark angels carried onward their war for Terra. They became a shadowed blade, tucked away in the Imperium's arsenal, their actions draped in secrecy, their motives unreadable as cold stars. The hunt for the fallen consumed them utterly. It became their very marrow, their prayer and penance, a brutal chapter of history rewritten daily in scorching promethium and thick, falling blood. While the Horus heresy ended, the galaxy remained ablaze. Worlds lay broken husks, the Imperium staggering on the edge of an abyss carved by Horus's betrayal, its survivors hollowed out by loss. Of the loyalists who endured, none labored beneath a burden half as crushing as the Dark Angels. Their Primarch gone, vanished utterly after the apocalypse on Caliban, their legion structure splintering, their honor forever tarnished by the sickness within. Yet redemption became their driving star, a desperate oath sworn to claw back their name, cleanse their shame before the Emperor's sightless gaze. From the wreckage of their legion, the surviving commanders forged a chilling design. An inner circle crystallized a conclave of the most hardened masters, bound less by brotherhood than by shattering oaths of silence, absolutes so profound not even the finality of death could break them. These secret masters became the ardent priests of truth, the grim archivists for the civil war that had nearly erased them. Nobody outside their grieving company could ever know the infection had touched their heart, that traitorous fallen still drew breath among the stars. Revelation spelled ruin, the entire legion could be condemned as heretics, the unforgiven hunted as the very scum they despised. This fortress of silence exacted a bloody upkeep. To safeguard against the creeping rot, the Dark Angels erected intricate, suffocating structures of suspicion and endless, watchful scrutiny. The inner circle became their own jailers, ceaselessly searching for any tremor of doubt, any fragment of weakness within their ranks. Despite their losses, raw and gaping, they dispersed their fleets to silenced alarums across the expanse, answering the Imperium's sundered cries for salvation. In the lethal crucible of the Cadian sector, they fought side by side with the Blood Angels, a shared, silent lament for vanished Primarchs forging a bond of bleeding steel. On death-choked Satha Prime, their guns fired crimson arcs over ultramarine lines, stemmed the tide of Nurgle's endless filth until Exterminatus cleansed the festering world. On countless fields, they were hailed, their devotion to the golden throne above suspicion. Yet the crushing truth sat upon their shoulders like a sepulchral stone. Even as they shed seas of blood to safeguard the Emperor's realm, the bone-deep need gnawed. Their librarians, minds stretched taut through the howling Empyrean, sought any echo, any shred of their glorious forefather. The effort yielded only void. L. Johnson was gone, his fate lost even to the Legion's preeminent psychers. Instead, their writhing scrying unveiled a more pervasive horror, a poison already in the veins. The fallen yet lived. Remnants of the treacherous brethren, who had cast their lot with Luther amidst Caliban's death throes, were not dust as wrongly assumed. Cast adrift into that same monstrous warp storm that shattered their world, the fallen were strewn across the breadth of the galaxy, disparate embers of betrayal still glowing, malevolent fingerprints smudged upon the tapestry of imperial light radiating from Terra. For the inner circle, this dread knowledge pulsed with paradoxical possibility. As long as the fallen drew breath, the Legion's hidden shame could be exposed. Their survival also, perversely, traced a path to possible absolution. Hunt them down. Force repentance upon them. Let their agonized end cleanse that stain. Then, finally, perhaps, the Legion's shattered honor might be laid whole once more upon the altar of the Emperor. This hunt was not a war of armies clashing. It was a ghost war, fought in shadows knit from rumor and desperate confession, across distances measured in nightmares instead of light years. The fallen, scattered through time and the shifting wilderness of space, were elusive phantoms. Some festered among the stars, their hearts irrevocably corrupted by the whispers of chaos. Others, perhaps haunted, choked with corrosive regret for the choices curdling their souls, sought penance in howling silence. Yet every flicker of intel, every disfigured rumor spoken in terrified whispers that hinted at a fallen presence, triggered a fanatical crusade. The Dark Angels would abandon anything alliances, oaths, entire war zones to snare their prey. This all-consuming compulsion became the chapter's crippling spine. Imperial records bled with accounts. Entire battlefields left bereft mid-fury as Dark Angel forces pivoted away from carnage, vanishing to chase whispers carried by the void winds. Allies watching in stunned fury as support vaporized. Vital campaigns collapsing into ruin, all immolated upon the pyre of this obsessive hidden war. The rock itself evolved into a dual-natured prison barge hurtling through the void. Within its lightless bowels, the inner circle forged interrogation chambers hollowed out like confession booths in hell. Captured fallen were dragged before implacable judges who wore the faces of brothers. Many died within walls echoing with screams, bodies broken beneath the implacable quest for confession, their resolve shattered long before their life guttered out. For the Dark Angels, this meticulously calibrated agony wasn't malice. It was harsh, necessary penance, the singular crucible where the rot upon every soul could be burned away. Centuries bled into millennia. The Dark Angels and their successor chapters, cloaked under the collective shroud of the unforgiven, earned grim renown. To the teeming bulk of the Imperium, they appeared as implacable blades wielded for the throne grim, distant, their motives mysteries carved from ice, their wrath elemental. To those who fought alongside them, an unsettling chill lingered, a palpable conviction that the Dark Angels waged wars locked behind unseen doors, their focus fractured by haunted obligations. Now, plunging into the seething chaos of the era Indomitus, shadows cloaked deeper under the nightmare pall of the Noctis Eterna. As the galaxy convulsed, split asunder by the bleeding maw of the cicatrix maledictum, the Dark Angels stood at the precipice. The rock, the keystone of their fractured identity, the ossuary where their darkest truths lay interred, shuddered under assault from within. A demonic legion erupted, slavering hosts led by the Falenternediman Prince Marbaz breached its unimaginably ancient wards, flooding its labyrinthine corridors, defiling its haunted sanctums. War boiled from docking spires choked with void-scarred hulls down to the echoing torture pits, where the scream of ancestral guilt resonated loudest. The invaders came shrouded in purpose, lost beneath rivers of gore and mindless hate. When the slaughter tide finally ebbed, leaving the corridors slick and stinking with demonic ichor, the attackers simply vanished as suddenly as they had manifested. Among the weary battle brothers scraping gore from their battleplate, the consensus flowed towards frustrated relief, mindless destruction, a ritual atrocity achieving nothing. Only Azrael, Supreme Grand Master, bearing the crushing mantle of secrets, knew the terrifying reality, tasted ashes on his tongue. Deep within vaults known only to him, a containment breach echoed with terrifying silence. Luther, the arch-traitor himself, the poison at the heart of every unjust death, the font of all their shame, was gone. This cold truth branded Azrael's spirit like a white-hot iron upon bare flesh, but he shouldered its impossible weight alone. This secret could never be shared. Luther's existence, let alone his disappearance, was a detonation charge placed upon the very foundations of their oath-bound secrecy, the fragile shield protecting the chapter from outright annihilation as heretics. Azrael swore vengeance anew, setting the hounds of the hunt to a fevered pitch, even as the chilling implications burrowed deeper. Had this entire catastrophe, the demonic tide, the supreme sacrifice in lives, been crafted by warp sorcerers merely as diversion? The question hung rancid in the air, unanswered and binding as chains. As lingering smoke coiled up from scarred plating upon the wounded rock, catastrophe unfolded light years distant. On the fire-scarred shrine world of Dark Moor, a disparate gathering of the unforgiven unfolded angels of vengeance, consecrators, guardians of the covenant converging under librarian-cast portents whispering of fallen activity. They descended, a mailed fist ready to strike. Instead, they walked into the closing jaws of an exquisitely baited trap. Warp storms, like predators answering a silent call, surged anew, trapping them planet-side. Amidst shattered cathedrals and crumbling reliquaries, it wasn't the fallen they found. It was swift, pitiless hell unleashed. Demons boiling up from cursed ground, traitor Astartes emerging from shadows cast by broken piety, packs of howling renegades, a tide of pure malice poured onto them. The massacre unfolded brutal and swift. Sequestered worlds away, entire campaigns stalled as chapters ceased communication. Scouts reported relays fallen silent. Of the 1,000 space marines who breached Darkmoor's poisoned sky, less than 100 clawed their way back to the voidborn sanctuary of their ships. Their salvation owed nothing to valor. Only the desperate flight of the cipher, another elusive fallen, himself pursued, had inadvertently led the ragged survivors to a long-buried teleporter, a desperate escape route flickering into death or capture. Amidst the wreckage of these twin calamities, physical and existential, Azrael issued a near-impossible summons. All supreme grand masters of the unforgiven chapters must gather upon the scarred rock. Traversing the great rift's tumultuous madness meant accepting monstrous peril. Chapters answered, though many were harried beyond endurance, a successor chapter swallowed whole by the warp's gnashing maw, others abandoning war zones where imperial worlds gasped towards extinction. As the splintered legacy of Lion L. Johnson struggled across the storm-ravaged void, Desperation pulsed within Azrael like a secondary heartbeat. He resolved to wait no longer. Salvation, when it arrived, landed like a thunderclap amidst the battered silence enveloping the rearmed fortress monastery. A colossal identification signature blazed upon the auspex. Not the tattered remnants of a waylaid successor chapter, but the unmistakable beacon of Robot Guilliman, Primarch of the Ultramarines, the Avenging Sun, newly arisen Lord Commander of the Imperium. The sight of his vast fleet eclipsing the very stars above the rock froze the blood in Azrael's veins, colder than deep space. Did he know? Had all their centuries of secrecy, the sacrifices made, the battles abandoned, the secrets choked upon, had it all collapsed into ruin? Was this the final judgment crashing upon their heads? Azrael's mind raced through poisoned avenues. Order the hunt-scattered chapters to vanish utterly. Abandon the very cornerstone of their survival, the rock. Or defiance, guns bristling against a returning Primarch? That suicidal gesture would be their final act, marking them traitors before the witnessing galaxy. He chose neither abyss. The towering gates of the fortress groaned open a silent acceptance. Guilliman and his legion were permitted to dock. This dread encounter transcended fear. It manifested not as divine wrath, but baffling generosity. Guilliman came not to censure, not to excavate the terrible bones hidden beneath centuries of lies, but to commission them. Rank upon rank of unfamiliar warriors disembarked. Primaris Space Marines, vast and grim as fortresses walking, bearing the lineage of Lion L. Johnson etched into their genicode, armored in the shadowed greens and blacks of the unforgiven bloodlines. Guided through ritualistic maneuvers that bordered on the excessive. Azrael watched them form, an eerie procession that was at once familiar and deeply alien. The War Council unfolded, the Lord Commander's voice methodical, grave, stripping away illusion. The Great Rift had dismembered the Imperium. It bled out from 1,000 wounds inflicted by burgeoning horrors. Guilliman outlined the Indomitus Crusade brutal, relentless operations designed to shore up collapsing defenses, reclaim vital worlds, stave off the gathering night consuming humankind. Guilliman addressed the Dark Angels specifically. He acknowledged their distinct battle signatures, the unique structure of their wings, traditions ossified over millennia. His painstaking, newly crafted Codex Astartes demanded conformity, standardization, yet here, Azrael heard it clearly. The Lord Commander granted his cursed chapter a profound exemption. They could retain their sacred rites, their specialized orders, their inward-looking legio structure. If they wielded their unmatchable strength solely for the Imperium's survival, obligation demanded response. For the first time in 10,000 years, the supreme Grand Masters of the myriad unforgiven chapters bent their century-esrupt knees together not in secrecy, but beneath the blazing lumens in explicit fealty. They knelt as one. They pledged their chapters, their vaulted arsenals, every sword, every bolter, every life to Guilliman's desperate purpose, the survival of a crumbling Imperium. A resounding vow shook the echochamber rock beneath the Primarch's feet. But even as Azrael's head remained devoutly bowed, and the unfamiliar, resonant voices of the Primaris battle captains replied with unfamiliar vigor, the cold dread persisted, a serpent coiled around his spine. Luther roamed free. Somewhere beyond the light, the very architect of their damnation plotted in darkness. The fallen remained a festering infection, tainted power might exploit this fragile new dawn. Guilliman brought unstoppable reinforcements, terrifying yet sanctioned power, and tore the veil between the unforgiven. The future surged before them into the teeth of the Indomitus Crusade, gleaming with terrifying new power, haunted by ancient, inescapable ghosts. The path held necessity, driven by Guilliman's cosmic purpose, but the burden never lightened. The hunt endured, the bloodette remained uncancelled. The prison walls built upon 10,000 years of obsessive secrets creaked louder than ever beneath the terrifying weight of their dual, inescapable shadow. Luther unleashed, and the eternal, all-consuming hunt. The thunderous roar of battle hymns mingled with the scream of plasma incinerators, as Primaris Hellblaster Sergeant Gus rallied his squad against a tide of screaming cultists on some unnamed, ash-choked plain. The newly designed weapons a deadly extension of their unwavering purpose. Beside him, scarred veterans of the Deathwing grunted approval through vox grunts as ceramite fists met traitor skulls, spattering gore across verdant armor acceptance, as Gus later reflected in the echoing gloom of the barracks decks. his voice thick with the sulfur tang of spent promethium, was indeed earned in blood, baptismal and brutal, and side by side they had bled rivers onto forgotten worlds, forging grudging respect into the brittle steel of belonging among the unforgiven. This slow, grinding integration was a harsh litany written in the scars of countless campaigns, yet far within the cloistered shadows of the rock, in sanctums shielded by millennia of silence and sigils of forbidding. The whispers held no trace of camaraderie, but the glacial weight of millennia. The inner circle stewards, custodians of damnation and divine burden, debated with the low, dangerous fervor of storm fronts clashing. The heart of their contention was the Primaris, these suns forged in Martian tubes, untainted by the ancient, soul-crushing guilt, the poison that flowed in the veins of every true son of Caliban who remembered. Could they, untouched by the cadaver stink of betrayal that haunted the chapter's soul, truly bear the terrible, treasonous truth of the fallen? Arguments slashed the dense air like unsheathed blades. Pragmatists, faces grimly set, argued the Imperium's need demanded every blade against the hordes devouring its carcass, while traditionalists spat venom at the sacrilege, the very idea of sharing their shrouded grief, their hereditary shame, with outsiders who hadn't wept as Caliban died in fire and heresy. Supreme Grand Master Azrael, standing as rigid as his engraved artificer armor amidst the storm, bore the crushing mantle of this judgment like the rock itself rested upon his pauldrons. The escape of Luther, the arch-traitor, resonated like a poisoned bell within his skull. Each fissionable report filtering through clandestine channels whispered of fallen mustering like carrion birds in the tumultuous somnium, stars a gathering storm colossal enough to shatter stars, demanding every last sword of the unforgiven. Division, now, was a luxury akin to suicide. To still the dissonance, Azrael wove a harsh, singular trial. Brother Afarin, a former gray shield whose blade had cleared decks choked with tyrannid chitin alongside the Deathwing, stood under the obsidian scrutiny. Azrael's voice, cutting through the cryptcelence of the inner sanctum as ancient holograms flickered with images of fire and betrayal, declared the Primaris Sun would face the sacred trials, look into the abyss of their darkest legacy. If Afarin emerged, faith in the Emperor unblemished amidst the avalanche of damnable truth, then even these newcomers perhaps had the Flinthard core to shoulder the chapter's eternal burden. Azrael himself oversaw the harrowing effigy, stood unmoving as Ottoman's spectral horrors and visions of Luther's perfidy washed over the kneeling Afarin in waves of psychic torment, witnessing the young warrior's eyes flicker, not with doubt but grim resolve as the history of the First Legion schism scourged his soul. Emerging pale yet unbowed, unbroken by the avalanche of shame, Afarin proved the calcified doubters wrong. Azrael's high-stake gamble blazed, a beacon against suffocating tradition. Many former dissenters yielded to the Supreme Grand Master's iron conviction, now fused to Afarin's proven metal. Though deep suspicion like old rust lingered in the Masters of Successor chapters, yet even they bent, however stiffly, conceding to Azrael's hard-won wisdom and the brutal imperative of shared, sacrificial duty laid upon them all. Thus the path coiled open, stark under the persistent, weighty shadow of Luther's orchestrations, for Primaris to step tentatively into the inner circle's lightless crucible, their inclusion forged not from affection, but the unyielding, pragmatic necessity of an era where hell itself seemed to be pressing at the gates, a vital tool amidst the encroaching dark. Yet even as this tense, silent unity coalesced within the fortress monastery, the dark angels innate, flinty mistrust unfurled beyond their own ranks like poisoned petals. The clattering tech priests of Mars, redrobed magi vital for Primaris genesis and gestation, found their every cognitive breath monitored, tracked, their sanctuary within the rock ancient, consecrated, layered with secrets thicker than adamantium, became a gilded cage, access ruthlessly gated, reduced to sterile, greenlit foundries and barracks kept under penetrating vigilance, unwelcome pilgrims feared as potential vectors for heresy or idle curiosity into that which must never be known. Simultaneously, the chapter's own tech marines, engraving the aquila onto artificerat servoharnesses, and apothecaries, delving into the intricate biology of the Belisarian fugue within transhuman flesh, labored in sweat-drenched, ozone-heavy vaults possessed by fanatical need to untangle the Primaris secrets. Driven by the fervent, bitter dream of casting off Martian reliance forever, achieving that final bastion of pure, untainted sovereignty. So the Unforgiven fought on, the notorious Ten's thousand-year hunt resuming across war zones lit by dying suns, projecting enviable cohesion and bone-shattering ferocity to the scattered eyes of a disintegrating Imperium. Yet beneath that seamless, grim discipline, the tensions simmered, a magma chamber beneath unyielding plate. Whispers stained with suspicion sprouted like rot within the labyrinthine catacombs of inquisitorial fortresses' accusations of legion building, of the dark angels gathering their storm-racked, might not merely for defense, but aspiration. Sharp observers noted their burgeoning martial power could dwarf Robout Guilliman's nascent Ultramar Imperium, a potential counterweight to his juggernaut political dominion, while fatalists trembled at the chapter's profound secrecy, its defiant autonomy, seeing only a dagger poised to rend the cancerous Imperium's exposed vitals, a seedbed for yet another devastating schism. Yet debates, idling in smoky stratagems while worlds burned, held little weight against the hurricane roar of reality. Gossip curdled into reverence in Voxjetter, relayed across embattled systems, where Supreme Grand Master Azrael bent knee after decisive victory on broken altar worlds, his armored hand lifting the chapter banner slicked in traitor ichor. The Unforgiven spoke, not with hollow proclamations, but the reeking refuse of shattered starships plunging from dead sky, purgifiers cleansing entire warrens of heretic infestation, grim, relentless agents carrying the Emperor's wrath inevitably wrapped in secrecy into the darkest corners of Hyber transport graveyards, and creeping Oblivion systems writhing with demon spawn, sustaining the mythic dread of the First Legion even within the impossible horror known as the Era Indomitus. This era tested the Dark Angels with fiery lashes unseen since their homeworld's annihilation, yet amidst encroaching doom, they clawed victory from the gnawed bone heaps of chaos bastions, carving a brutal, blood-slicked path forward. The Primaris Marines, once derided as Martian constructs, began etching their defiant epitaphs onto the souls of their battle brothers beneath Calibanite skies, feeling the dead world's guilty gravity pulling at them too. The inner circle remained an armored fist clenched around its poisonous truth, scarred by veiled doubts but unyielding in its vigil. While Azrael, as ascetic and weathered as the stone he commanded, broad shoulders scarred under polished ceramite by the ceaseless Herculean load of leadership, stood essential against the prowling, unseen tempest symbolizing Luther's return, knowing the archtraitor's victory meant oblivion. Simultaneously, beyond the obsidian sails of ships prowling the void, within the fractured, shuddering hulk known as Imperium Nihilus, shadows grew teeth. Fragmented truths spilled from ragged fugitives staggering from decimated ports, tales wrung out under brutal interrogation of prisoners, filled mouths cracked by chaos taint. A dark tide, monolithic and grim, surfacing amidst the celestial inferno of the Somnium, stars a twisted conquered, a corrupted legion reforged from shattered angels fallen, banding beneath the ominously silent banner, held aloft by a figure radiating chilling malice distilled into potent whispers. These ghostly intonations breached even the psychic-lit gloom of the inner circle's innermost redoubt, slithering towards Azrael like spectral midnight mirrors reflecting his permanent nightmare. Gripping the pommel of the Sword of Secrets until his ceramite knuckles screamed internally, the Supreme Grand Master's steely certainty concretized into icy dread instinctively. Bone deep, he knew. Only one spirit could command the venomous loyalty of a host so fractured and proud. Only one soul could sustain their putrefying hatred and vaulting, annihilating ambition for 10 grinding millennia. Luther, the arch-betrayer, Caliban's vengeful shadow, moved once more among the stars, and his malignant resurrection heralded a conflict that threatened to shatter the Dark Angel's fractured history like brittle glass scattered across Oblivion's void, scorching their very identity down to dead, radioactive bedrock. Yet somewhere in the fathomless, echoing depths beneath the rock, within vaults crusted with glacial frost and heavy with the scent of millenniadry incense, shielded beneath soaring cathedral arches carved with battles lost and forgotten, beneath labyrinthine tombs hollowed from the calcified heart of their asteroid strongholds safeguarding ancient Padawan mysteries now gone to dust in Caliban's destruction, something ancient beyond memory stirred deep within the bedrock. silent as vacuum, potent as stellar collapse. A presence resonated on a frequency felt only by the silent arrivals perpetually near. For 10,000 patient millennia, Lion L. Johnson, first Primarch, lay bathed in temporal stillness indistinguishable from death, guarded vigilantly by watchers whose motives remained as unreadable as nebulous streamers snaking through the void. Generation upon generation of chapter masters and inner circle lords had prayed to whispered legends of his eventual resurrection, sculpting shrines to the possibility, but millennia of profound, unbroken silence had pressed upon their faith, grinding expectation almost into weary acceptance, into mute resignation. Now, inevitably, irresistibly, as if directed by fate intersecting the rupture tearing through the galaxy heralded by Luther's emergence, the lion stirred. His awakening unfolded starkly. One searing moment did not herald sudden light or celebratory fanfare, but the terrifying absence of suffocating stillness within a tomb chamber of perpetual twilight. Lion L. Johnson's eyes, piercing and warlike as freshly honed steel after eons gathering seclusion's dust, snapped open to the faint luminescence shimmering off polished obsidian beneath where he'd rested outside linear time itself. Drawing his first unhurried yet profoundly heavy breath into iron, lungs long functional only automatically sent millennia cascading in. 10,000 years of choked grief, stinging betrayal, agonizing loss compressed into a heartbeat, one resonant core understanding resounding through the Primarch's formidable psyche like a baleful war gong. Everything he knew had burned away utterly. His powerful hand, thick with rebuilt musculature long unused yet etched with ancient calluses, clenched instinctively around the hilt of an irresistible blade left beside him traditionally centuries prior. Its monumental weight felt simultaneously familiar the beloved weight of soulkeeper-shattering Xenos, scum on forgotten worlds sworn to compliance and alien upon his senses, like grasping Terran history through frozen mud. Pushing upright to his full, dominating height, the lion surveyed the moss-grown chamber, unchanging since his enigmatic departure. The mythic watchers in the dark, concealed within layered shadows pooling unnaturally around statuary pedestals, observed his rising with veiled expressions betraying nothing outwardly to his penetrating gaze, as per their species. The sprawling, blood-soaked ruin of the galaxy unfolded before Lionel Johnson, not through Vista Payne's blessing, but knowledge encoded within ancient codes and incomprehensible empath projections rippling across his heightened awareness. It shattered everything remembered. The glorious Imperium he'd slaughtered years constructing alongside brothers scattered or corrupted was obliterated utterly, replaced by fragmented, bleeding domains ringed by endless enemies and theological insanity strangling imagination. Darkness spilling into every crack like boiling tar, defined by terrifying half-light filtering nightly entirely within nihilist void. Yet relentless purpose crystallized within Lion L. Johnson, a sword thrust from frigid lakes. Unlike his brother Guilliman, returned rebuilt as reluctant administrator, the lion emerged unaltered at his core. A predator clad in immortal mercilessness, armored in preternatural skill, honed specifically for war's brutal harvest. Predator awakened brought instantaneous overwhelming vengeance igniting within, a cold fire intense enough to freeze solar flames burning within his eyes as vision snapped into sharp focus on plunging into the galaxy's treacherous veins headfirst. Whispers possessed teeth by the time stories manifested legend across terrified worlds under siege. Shattered void ships reported terrors beyond comprehension, dissolving as from dark gravitational tides, needing warp residue, would emerge towering specter colossal figure, wrapped mantled in shredding great cloaks, woven from lonely nebula sails and petite predator skins, sewn relentlessly together into flowing obscurity. Shimmering foliage grown unnaturally ancient festooning mighty warhelm. Vanished Threathusks reflected burning a companion signature, cleaving Xeno scourges apart with brutal finesse near abyss gates. Some termed him Eldritch Crusader. Others whispered unblinking judge, informed by voices echoing misery-twisted tales. Many desperate souls trembling behind failing defenses, exalted rumors of God Emperor himself, descended incarnate to meet unparalleled judgment upon humanity's global tormentors slithering across stars. Secretive task naturally commenced quietly as expected of genetic inheritor of Caliban's hunting lodges. Lion L. Johnson hunted perfected hunter-executioner magnificently, stalking horrific monsters, traversing warp conduit passages, purging corrupted traitor flesh spilling from sanctuary beneath dying stars' swords forged eons prior, cleaving apart striking devastating likeness of ancient invincibility faded to myth. Engaging in solitary destruction, simultaneously, the Lion demanded answers mapped constrained territory mentally taking measure of the galactic carrion pit. Questions cascaded inside carefully mapped neural networks burning intensely fate of dark angels, the plummeting history of his sons, lost across untamed millennia. Gilliman role entangling itself fragile Imperium governance above Corpsathrone, a millennia impervious. Luther's icy betrayal depth, sinking beyond fathoming Caliban's death itself necessary to erase fetal corruption. The first souls encountered directly after his reawakening weren't human at all. Silently, inevitably the ubiquitous watchers gliding in and out perception drew near, guiding relentlessly to chambers fervidly sealed since before recorded Terran history, retained dreams, hidden repositories, storing conditions, untouched even by contemporary chapter chroniclers, or treacherous inner circle, tasked, safeguarding last defense preventing dissolution, stained honor. Among forgotten artifacts shimmering almost perceptibly with technology, profiled outside Adeptus comprehension, alongside encrypted logs blazing overwhelmingly onto Lion's consciousness, therefore imparting brutal shards reflecting back 10,000 revolutions of Caliban agony, specifically tracing the betrayal plague splitting First Legion forever. He beheld their heroic sacrifice, destructive birth of fallen angels, birthed agonizingly fractured beyond redemption from earth of eternal despair. As undeniable fragments congealed overwhelming mosaic of sacrifice, twisted scandalously by survivalists fleeing parent world, Lion L. Johnson felt his psyche form ceramitekest. Clarity seen into this recovered history cemented mission with undeniable weight restoration, unwavering honor upon his first legion became relentless mission, manifest irrevocably. Until death liberated victory, preserved glory vindicated first creation existence, bestowed upon Holy Emperor himself. Deep within inviolate chronoproof sanctuary, the Watchers subtly wove through immaterium currents far safer than navigator clans, despairing attempted passage. Guiding warfarness inevitably accompanied the spectral apparition, occurring unannounced across catastrophe zones, like wraith manifesting all depth perception, simultaneously disarming relief and freezing terror, now lyrically entwinned. Recurring reports echoed scenario with monotonous compression. A flesh wound, spilling warrior's fortress desperately battling quadruped obscenity, suddenly distant shadows, coalescing around giant, whose indistinct figure detached, emerging obliterating horror beastnik hybrid moments, before physically registering noble presence, actually attending momentary cataclysm, upsetting battlefield equilibrium entirely without fanfare. Elsewhere starving dive traps, collapsing clearing witnessed Herculean armored form, hurling slaughtered cadaver puppets through reinforced bulkheads, merely inspecting tactical parameters like chess strategist observing trivial endgames, altered forever by unexpected depth charge. Wherever this phantom planted feet reality, buckled unnaturally fading soon afterwards. Legend bled untraceably into system myths, whispering domain naming, conventions the unreachable nemesis recognized inevitably. Crowned giant shielding, ragged refugees clambering over mom's corpses. Unforgiving night acknowledged with despairing acceptance amongst chaos forces, escaping apocalyptic superstorms, crawling from fringes towards sentient achieved biome planets. Upon hearing approach signal, hurried evacuation abandoning prizes, considered absolute until that hour. Whilst his crisscross scenic warfare carved namesake reputation deeper system, legends compounding the Lion's spectral passage, inevitably crystallized notice convergence, inevitably drawing monstrously near ultimately to the Somnium star's combustion source, whirling, incessantly like cancerous accretion disk, encircling supermassive disbelief Luthers, gathering warhost straddling reality visibly. Lion accepted this collision course entropy, ordained inevitable focal point, unleashing legendary confrontation burning since desertion. 10,000 solar rings, failed justifying bitterness contaminating fatherhood trust, dissolving parried vengeance towards Primarch's dark, other became totem quest. Fundamentally, wrapped inexorably destiny, forged, now approaching critical shape, emerging within gravitational tethers cartographers, assigned Rexia systems physics, complex, theoretically impossible skipping prematurely causality, chains bewilderingly within measurable distance. For 10,000 years lion bore, crushing weight bitter ferment, within sternum rigid, hatred directed towards, would be fratricide, extending, awaiting now channeled toward purging fire necessary permanently cleansing galaxy, inevitably spilling flames burning through monstrous shadow once adored. Elsewhere not far stellar region dominance, anchored sea-borne identification beacon designated racks by archaic administratum. Crusted data slates the grueling groundwork ground away under attrition years, lost translation, meaninglessly produced, unending futility trenches, impossible muck-fetid miles Imperial Guard, awaited judgment, collectively praying final forgetting. Supreme Grand Master Azrael arrived imperiously aboard massive vessel, Angel of Retribution, followed majestic oppressive escort fleet halo-dropping shadows, drowning beleaguered defenders, festering underground bunkers, welcoming silent aid godsent. Although coordination remained tragically impossible pro forma command niceties, hollowed meaningless against Azrael's assigned priority objective dictated Shadow Council policy. Utter silencing, chaos-infected Stargate portal detach reinforcements, not Senate inquiry debrief. Without merest trace ceremony shoulders, lifting lance pallet, beneath smoked canopy slowly thunderhawks, plunged like relentless Vikings, eternally retributive clearing skies for vengeful ravenwing squadrons, painting obsidian torturous resolve cutting patterns, weaving unerringly through pagan defense fire flora choking landscape, Astra Militarum called home. Behind descended columns terminators marching steadfastly arming boars, chanting hymns celebration immolation voices, prophesying retribution, escalating chain explosions, turning racks, horizon pulsing wound light pollution. 9 unceasing cycles daylight dimmed unseasonably polluted crimson dust, weathering assault promised annihilation immovable command point remained Azrael personally orchestrations, proving terrifying efficiency, forcing adversary shrinking perimeters, maneuver vaporized via unseen precision targeting vectors, systematically purging heresy routes. Sickening chaos cries, mutated militia died bubbling trenches, seeming only urge fight flowing upwards, meet unstoppable advance everlasting nightmare. Hurling himself bound relentless strategy Azrael remained terrifying spearhead embodiment, muscled spearhead blitz rhythm, Liberian blade flashing hammered belt, proclaiming hunt, still promised simultaneously defense, intrinsically linkage pressing, inevitably onwards grim resolution lending ferocity, inspiring brotherhood staggering injuries simultaneously. Beneath engraved shoulder pads, silhouetted perpetual haze, his command chilling unit execution, achieving impossible momentum. Morning last light cloud smoke, covered ultimately revealed defenders' shattered shells, whereby Azrael ordered inevitable volt execution cycle, converging upon the gate installation, itself flaying any endemic resistant space sector, remaining composition, 1st, 2nd, 5th, 8th, 9th company elements, roiling industrial hellscape, simultaneously joined reinforced assault overwhelmingly deathwing terminators, driving stake heart rabid enemy. Dismounting personal land raider, gate barely holding trembling ruins supreme grandmaster. Stepped uniquely flooded gerund Martian mechanical precision, uncaring battlefield evolution, adopting posture defiant night antiquity clenching sword secrets. Instantly augmenting phraseology butchering cultist ringleaders, choking ground fluids viscous crimson stream, observed central strength collapsing catastrophe, agitated outlining, impacting helmet sensor, arrays primitive pounding drumbeat victory, sounding robustly through grimy accumulation chaos. Justification approaching triumph grew palpable tumultuous foundations, until Imperial's phantom awareness sensed atmospheric shift disharmony, with 1,000 tiny fiber pressure variations, multiply exponentially amid swirling pyroclasts, previously dismissed residues, punctured surface, violently surging forth concealed bulkheads, like cancer-spawning active entities hostility, emerging nightmare elements known world chaos reverberation, emanates exclusively Realm Alpha collection. Corrupted Astartes tactical killing machines, poured treacherously coordinated, efficient hallmarks destruction, unexpected. Trap detected finally violently sprung dark demons screaming acceleration, declaiming honor. Supreme Grandmaster, Azrael ensnared demon pack commander, seemed walking maze warp slinking shapes, suddenly unexpected fluctuations. Hammered eagle wing formation momentum dissolve into swirling underwater emplacement, fighting chaotic piecemeal, exposed brotherhood dying understand reason. Sight slammed disbelief stunning moment through the clatter mast, ambushers predatory advance witness trusted form transhuman splendor. Vanishing ensign bearer Villas stumbling agony entropy tremblor gifted splendor life support. Display, acknowledging tearing heretics weapon answers, tearing backwards sacred emblem chapters resilience moment, tumbling dissolving sinking mud plasma fires, igniting resolved mechanism. Lost psychically ripped heart, resolve momentarily impossible deviation Azrael. Registered event neural pathways transhuman resilience broke discipline, constraint generating inappropriate sensation, years aggregated bitter distilled fury unquenchable volume, directed solely towards return emblem, surpassing power hurtling backwards, polluted air impact screams weaponry ricocheting harmlessly away his armored path, impossibly acknowledges deflection, single-minded target essential banner, ripped mud showering, debris landing violently atop silent tally essence contained sacred. Symbol state defiance, extracted filthy chaos soil present decision. Victory entirely simultaneity vaporizing, making physical expression, recovering prize clutching object tight. Forenamed blade rising almost unbelievably armed simultaneously, became instantly futile opponent materializing grinding skull, crushing panic, transversely emerged from the very fabric smoke pall, polluted stinking hostile concentration, furiously demanding opponent sufficient challenge. Figure stark silhouette monumental rune-etched, power armor illogically inscribed blasphemy chaos, undivided patchwork. Hue standing 3 meters minimal surface, defining cautionary crucible newly arrived combatant wielding great dark blade, terrifying familiarity judge banner master Azrael, set eyes master corrupted opponent. Designation flickered subdermal recognition arrogance, the faithless chaos lord legendary reputation naked fearlessness, leveled graphic hierarchy bitter contemptuous, regard crushing tutelary hash easily previously unnoticed assault, marine stupid contemptible assault, unceremoniously halved collapsing furious splatter residues across reality suddenly granted definition maggot soul, rapidly descending upon object supreme, obtained truthfully deserved tragic fate ensuing. Supreme Grandmaster, Azrael blinked silent acceptance wasting essential micromotion, gathering resolve chapters remaining composure sacred banner, clamped firmly vice grip unnatural stillness, left hand arm reached parallel soul setter, held upright imperious gesture sanction, promising chilling dual consequence, immediate vengeance, seamlessly flowing actions, priori avowed fascination self-aggrandizement oppressor's periphery. Stepping forward, met faithless leader ready slow harvest inevitable conclusion, invested properly Terran measured century, cataclysmic melee desperate warriors. Paused wide, eclipsed duelist figures, ringed convergence undeniable calamitous promise resolves, concluding chaos manifest arms, impacted roaring torments alteration, released requiring witnesser dedication. Faithless first unleashed explosive charge strikes crashing plague, born comparable ancient enlightenment, gifted lightnings, catastrophic scouring initial exchanges, rapidly dissolved accelerated blur, figures impossible compare utilized unmatched violence. The air crackled with malice as arrows, dark blade shrieked against Azrael's golden plate, biting deep, drawing vidi that steamed into the choking smoke. Pushed to the brink, the Supreme Grandmaster fought with grim precision, meeting ferocity with counterstrokes that forced the Chaos Lord back, yet failed to breach the infernal energies shielding his foe. Fueled by the jewel's relentless hunger, arrows pressed his assault, a thunderous shoulder charge throwing Azrael sprawling, his blade clattering uselessly away. Clutching the sacred standard, Azrael met his tormentor's gaze, steeling himself for the final strike he could not dodge. Arrows raised his weapon high, the killing blow poisonedly to be sundered by a storm of fire. The raking roar of an assault cannon tore through the din, staggering the Chaos Lord, his black armor cracking and weeping warpfire. Into the fray swept interrogator chaplain Bagor leading Deathwing Terminators, their alabaster warplates scarred and soot-stained. With a defiant cry, Bagor closed the distance. His sacred Crozius struck with righteous fury, hammering arrows down in a spray of voidborn ichor. Brothers hauled their wounded chapter master upright, gathering around the banner he held fast. As Bagor turned to deliver justice, Arrows was gone, vanished like a phantom into the acrid gloom. The Alpha Legion ambush lay shattered, a costly reprieve. 200 loyal sons violated the ground, their quarry escaped once more. Yet defying despair, Azrael's command endured. Over 2 relentless days, demolition charges echoed across the war-torn wastes, reducing the starport to a corpse of slag and ember, sealing Rush's fate from chaos reinforcement. Task brutalized into completion, Azrael's strike force withdrew, holds groaning with captured renegades destined for the dungeons of the Rock and the interrogators' pitiless gaze. Rack stood as victory, its bitter taste searing like a brand upon the chapter's soul. Azrael bore the countless fallen with stoic fortitude, yet the jewel's malignant pulse and arrows, cunning shadow stalked his thoughts, a grim eternal truth. For the Sons of the Lion, triumph was forever measured in irrevocable sacrifice. A fragile victory balanced on the nifage between deliverance and despair across a galaxy